that if you've made your 40 hours for initial training, anything above that goes to AT, and the AT code you use is AT single presentation. Okay, so if you've made your 40 initial hours and you're going to record this as AT, it would be AT single presentation ornithology with the description. Good. All righty. Okay, I'm going to get a chair and sit. And you go, Jim. It's all yours.
Trying to get settled in what we want to do here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good acoustics in here.
It's a box, it ricochets.
I'm a lead singer in a barbershop quartet, so I may break into song.
I hope so.
Actually, I did sing lead in the barbershop quartet for a while. Krien and I have teamed up on several presentations, and we're going to talk about birds. And I thought, just so he and I would know, we have a pretty good idea what your backgrounds are. One of the nice things is somebody in here that's younger than 50. And most of the naturalists have experience to work with, like me. I'm 82. I'll be 83 in about 3 months. And why do I know anything about birds? I started an avocational birder when I was 35 years old, and got hooked on it. And it's just been one of my 2 or 3 hobbies for a lifetime, and it just evolved into this. I think the same would be said of Krien. His background may be different, but anyway, we are neither trained in biology nor certainly in ornithology. We've learned it out of a book or in the video, being interested in reading and that sort of thing. And he teaches in the college. Lone Star?
Yeah, I do a Lone Star program.
Lone Star segment, so if you are interested in those programs for retired people, et cetera, he does that. How many in here own pair of binoculars? Everybody. How many in here have field guide for birds and insects? Everybody. So I'm talking to the choir. And how many consider themselves to be birders? How many have been on, say, a Christmas bird camp? That's good. So there's going to be some interesting questions. This is probably Ornithology 101, and I'm the one that pushed this presentation for one reason. Everything that you've been trained on up to this point had a lot of biology built into it. I don't even know what you've taken, but I know what I took. And I have seen the curriculum that you all have been taking. So you've learned about plants and trees and environmental things and on and on and on and on. Excuse my throat. So I'm just trying to get a feel for where we are, is so I can kind of say the right things. I am very conservative in but I won't let that show, hopefully. I got to learn the pointer. Do that? Yeah. Krien teaches a course for Texas Department of Criminal Justice on this very same thing. He uses these slide presentations. They have a chapter in one of the prisons in the Huntsville area, and he teaches the ornithology to that class of inmates. They're not residents, I guess they're residents.
I'm a resident, 3 hours a minute, so I spend a day in prison. Once a year.
Hold that, yeah.
Body.
He gets to.
A little scary at times, don't really want to know why they're there, just teach the class and you don't want to know.
Now this, the beginning, my beginning may seem very simplistic, so bear with me. Because there's a science side to what we do in the Master Naturalist program, it's the best thing. It's the best thing in my elder years is to be able to be associated with the Master Naturalist program. We got to do a lot of neat stuff. And more than that, I've gotten to meet a whole bunch of neat, smart, enthusiastic people like yourselves. And I personally welcome you to the fold. You're going to enjoy it. It's one of those things that you can go as deep into working in the environment as you want to. And there are some rules attached to time, and you've been beat over the head about AT and BT and yada, yada, yada. And it's important. And you've heard about the idea of certification. You do all the hours, you get a certification. I've certified for 23 years. Because I felt like it was important to keep on training and do volunteer work. And that's what I'm here for. I was given a lot of information by teachers, and instructors, and people in the field. And I feel like one of my jobs is to share what I know. And maybe the best thing I can share is my enthusiasm, even though I'm not up here. I'm not charismatic by a long shot, but Krien is. Now, Krien gets off. Simplicity. This is how I want to start and get my own mind going. You know, what's unique about birds? And I used to ask questions, and we do that. We would kind of start melding together as a little synergistic group of people. But here are the things that are unique about birds. Birds fly. The only other critters are bats and insects that can fly. Feathers, no other critters have feathers. No other critters have beaks, bills. I call them bills. That's between Krien and I. Lay eggs, fish and reptiles. And telescopic sight, 2 eyes come together to focus. That's, some of the mammals have that, but not all. But we'll go into more of that. So anyway, that warms me up. Now I'm starting to get my blood flowing. Millions of years of transformations. I hope everybody in here subscribes to the concept of evolution, because this we are the product of evolution. So are they. They've been around a hell of a lot longer than we have. Can I say hell in here?
Yeah.
Okay, I did. That's twice I've said it.
Yeah.
Worldwide, 10,000 species of birds. North America, less than 1,000. Something like 900 known to be in North America. Krien may be able to get into that. But worldwide is kind of big. And if you go back to Pangea, and when the land masses were all together, the birds were evolving then before the continents split apart. So there are counterparts in the east and the west. There used to be 300 billion with a B, individual birds. You're going to hear us complain and emphasize that birds are like the rest of our environment. They're being beat up by us primarily, what we're doing. And so the bird populations in general are dropping worldwide, but certainly in North America. When When I think of birds, I think of North America. Not, we're in Montgomery County, not Montgomery County, not Texas, not the US. Well, maybe the US, but North America. Because the birds that you see, their entire natural history has been North America. Most of the birds that you see, anywhere you see birds in Texas, wherever you go in the continental US, those birds don't occur on other continents. Some do, but most do not. Anyway, enough of that. 10,000 worldwide, something like 1,000, and the last 200 of that 1,000 are accidental. They just show up for some reason or other, get caught in a storm, stray away, whatever. About 600 or so in Texas, statewide. And there's a whole bunch of people who call themselves birders who spend a whole lot of time listing birds that they see. That is their hobby. I've tried some of that, and I've got a life list, but some of these people do it every year. And so we have a real good handle on what species occur in Texas and in California and so on and so forth. In our part of Texas, southeast quadrant, and these are my numbers based on looking at checklists and all of that, about 350 species. Does that mean anything to you? 350 species of birds? Okay. For instance, blackbirds. I don't know, what, 6 species of blackbird, something like that. A hummingbird, 1 that breeds here. Though we have about 5 other species who at least migrate through here, and so on and so forth. Shorebirds, you know. Feathers. This is just. This is kind of designed for, say, 5th graders. In fact, I've gotten to talk to 5th graders. My daughter-in-law is a science coordinator at 5th grade school, 5th grade in an elementary school in the Denton School District, ISD. And she has a green team, and she's invited me to come up and talk to her green team. And every now and then I'll get a text, and she'll have a picture of something. Tell me what this is, so I can tell my green team what this is. Feathers, you know what they're for. Flight, temperature regulation, and of course, you've seen birds do their display. Mockingbird's a good example. You know, they do all sorts of neat things, and they're great singers. They're terrific singers. Feathers, there's all kinds of feathers, but the one on the left is a wing feather. We call those, that's a primary. That's the 10 feathers on the end of each wing that have the biggest square inch, and that's where they get their force for flying. The one, and then have down feathers, we all know those, but these are all modified skin, and they all serve a function. And the skeleton of a bird, anchors, flight muscles, and it talks about the furcula, if I can find the pointer. Right up here, right? The pointer. The furcula is this little thing that it's what we call the wishbone. It's furcula. And it's an important part of the muscle structure, the muscle anchor on it. But if you start looking at the names of the rest of the bone structure, we got this stuff too. We have a humerus and a radius, and a cranium, and upper and lower mandible, and pelvic girdle, and a femur. By the way, I broke my femur last year. I guess I'm lucky to be walking, but I am. Anyway, the furculum, this structure here is unique to birds. It's not even like our collarbone, even though it's part of our, it's unique to them anyway. So going on, if you look more and I blew that up too much. That's too small picture, but this is a blow up of the arm, and their wing is their arm, and there's the bone structure, which is almost totally analogous to ours, except you get out to the end and they have fused over that millions of years. Going on, if you, this is a blow up of a wing structure, and looks big, doesn't it? And how long is that wing on the screen? About 3 feet. That would be eagle size. One of the things is these primaries are the big ones out here on the end, and then the inner ones are called secondaries. And you can see that of the primaries, and these are the big feathers. There's 10 of those, and about 15 secondaries that run from about the elbow into the body. And then these are then covered by coverts. Guess what? Covert. These covert feathers just layer over. It's kind of like a shingle roof. And those are to protect the lower, protect the skin and protect these lower feathers. The secondaries protect the primaries, tertiaries, and then the other tertial feathers. But I don't know how many feathers a bird has. Do you know? 100,000?
Thousands.
Thousands and thousands and thousands. And I think the bigger birds do have more than the little birds. However, size makes a difference, but not necessarily in the number of primary feathers and all that. A hummingbird also has 10 primary feathers, even though their wing is only about that long. Their wings are like a hummingbird here. Let me think about this, 46 millimeters. Is average length for a hummingbird wing. That's not very big. Somebody calculate that. What's that in inches? 3 inches. I'd have to sit, it'd take me about 3 minutes to figure it out. And you can see then with the feathers, you start looking at the types of birds and the sizes of birds, and you realize that some birds behave differently, fly differently, and all that. So this little chart kind of shows you the same thing. Soaring birds like the raptor group, and of course vultures, not buzzards. That's a bird of Europe. Vultures are raptors as well. And by the way, we do have a stork, but not that one. Well, maybe that was. This would be, red-tailed hawk is Vudio, eagle, so on. But they are basically, those are soaring wings, pretty wide, but pretty long. Those that soar at sea, like the albatross and the gannet, which does occur off the Texas coast. We do have gannets off the Texas coast, and certainly a lot of seagulls. They do a lot of soaring, but they're more active. Whereas vultures just let it hang out. Elliptical wings would go with things like a grouse, but these are birds that move in a hurry and move in different places. And then high-speed wings, those that really get after it. Turns, ducks fly fast. They fly 40 miles an hour. They make a lot of noise when they do it. And swifts, I don't see swifts much anymore. Anybody got any chippy swifts? You haven't? I haven't seen them at my place. I live, gosh, 90 miles from here, outside of Crockett, Texas, in Houston County. And we moved out in the country and used to have swifts. Then I put a guard on my chimney, and I don't have swifts, so I don't see them anymore. But bills, beaks, Obviously for feeding, for defense, and for maintenance. What did I do?
Worry about that?
Let's look at some variable, and all this is elementary stuff. This is not, and I'm sure that this is a little bit mundane, but I meant to get a picture of a woodpecker. Well, it's gonna be a picture of my hand. This is an acorn woodpecker, right?
What is it?
Acorn woodpecker. Closest here would be West Texas. It's a western bird. We don't see them in Montgomery County. Acorn, ACORN. And this is a yellow warbler, which is a smaller bird. I was going to tell you, one of my other, I call this avocational. I'm a permitted bird bander, and I've been banding this for about 15 years, I guess. And I have handled woodpeckers, mostly the red belly. Mostly the red belly. Who's got the, yeah, you have the downy. She's got a downy that's leucistic. We may get to talk about that. Anyway, when you handle a bird, put a band on it, you have to handle it in your hands. And you grip it, hold the bird from the back. And you have the back of the bird is in the palm of your hand, and you use your thumb and your smaller out fingers just to wrap around it, just gentle enough to keep them, but they won't fly, they won't get away, they fight. And so sparrows are easy, cardinals can be pretty tough, because believe me, that bill on a cardinal, they can bite, really can. But what woodpecker does, and they're so quick, you can't, I was trying to get the woodpecker ready to put the band on it, and this was a male, turns his head around from here, and he starts. And that bill is so sharp, I looked down and it was polka dotted. It didn't take me long to get that band on to get him out of the bed. Or she, I can't remember. Okay, back to the purpose of this slide. This is a drilling type bill. This bill is kind of fairly long for the bird size. A yellow warbler is only about that big. And by the way, they are native to Texas during breeding season. They're hard to find. You got to go in the woods and the swamps to find them. They're hard to find. Whoops, did something. Crescent.
Got it?
For hummingbirds, that's nectarine. Of course, we all know what a hawkbill looks like, and I don't know what species of hawk it is. I'll just probably call it a red tail, for lack of another. But you can see that thing is a weapon. Bird banders worry a little bit about the bill when they're trying to handle, because if you, and I've got friends that are permitted to do that, I'm not. And they trap them, and they have special traps for raptors. And they try to control the wings down, but the thing that raptors will get you with is the talons. Quick, quick, quick. You can't react fast enough. And they can do some damage. So you learn to control the feet. And other bills, like the conical bill, like on this is a blue grosbeak, also native to Texas. I don't know if you're going to find them here in your neighborhoods down here. They are more into the forest and open country, but they do occur in the counties around Montgomery County, and probably in the big thicket part of Montgomery County, or maybe at Jones Forest. They may be there. They are local breeders. And if you haven't been to the coast and seen a black skimmer work, that's another bill type. See how that bird is just flying surface and dipping that lower mandible, pick up fish or whatever might be food. Feet, swimming, walking, the obvious stuff. And if you haven't seen some, well, this is not a particularly good picture, but that's a duck. That's a duck foot underneath that duck, and that's what is it? That's a.
I'm not sure.
I'll think of it in a minute. This is an American coot. I think all of you have seen American coots. You've gone out and scoped the lakes around here. You've seen American coots and great big floats. They flock together in the wintertime. They're a winter bird for us. Some do breed here. Not a lot, but some do breed here. They, after wintertime, they disperse north. But look at the foot on this thing. Still got the toes, but the toes are webbed. And it's specialization. We talk about that all the time with critters, specialization. And that has to do with how they feed mainly and how they navigate in the water, because they are swimmers. This thing on the left, who wants to identify this?
The heron.
Great blue. Somebody say, yeah, that's great blue, very common. There, you can see them flying over the interstates. You'll see them all over the woodlands or in the Conroe area, and they're very common here. And this, if you have bird feeder, you know what that is. That's a chickadee. And that's a Carolina chickadee, which is our local. There are 6 species of chickadee in North America. They're related to the tits of Europe. And you see a lot of you, if you watch Channel 8 in Houston, which has a lot of good documentary things. There's a lot of British studies that have been done on small birds like that. And these are very, very closely related to the great tit and some of the others in Europe. If you've ever seen one of those, who knows what that is? This bird. Yes, yes. You know, and when I started birding back in the 70s, golly, how long ago was that? Nearly 50 years. The osprey was almost extirpated, not extinct. That's a different term. Extirpated means it had been destroyed. It had no longer was occupying its old territory, which was here. DDT. That's another story for another time. And we may talk about that later, or you may hear about it a lot. But there were no ospreys to speak of on the upper Texas coast. None. They were a rare bird in 1975. I was on Christmas count. And my little party, we were out on the side of the Brazos River and we saw one osprey. And another group was upriver and maybe on the other side of the river. They saw the osprey. And so when it came time the night of the count, sit down. How many have been on Christmas counts? At the night of count, when we were trying to compile everything we saw that day, Victor Emanuel, I don't know if you've ever heard of Vic. He is now owns a birding tour company. And anyway, he was our compiler. And he was going through the list and he said, who saw an osprey? 2 people raising their hands because they were so rare in 1977, whatever year this was. And he said, both parties saw, or 2 parties saw an osprey. That was the first time osprey had been reported in Freeport in several years. Now you could see them all over the place. We took away one insulting chemical out of the atmosphere, out of our ecology by taking DDT and white compounds out of agricultural chemicals. We removed them, outlawed them, and within 15, 20 years, the birds were coming back. And not only was it osprey, brown pelican. There were no brown pelicans in Louisiana, and at the time, 1975, it still is. Brown pelican was a state bird in Louisiana, and they had no pelicans. So, this environmental stuff that we've done over the last 50 or 80 years is working. If we'll work it. Get off the soapbox. Climbing, a lot of birds can climb. That is tell me. Pileated woodpecker. Woody woodpecker was modeled after that. If you're a cartoon person. We have them here, they're in your yards. You'll see them, now you'll hear them long before you see them. They're not that obvious, but you'll hear them well. They've got a loud voice. But they'll rush into your yard and they'll go up a tree and they'll cackle a while, and often they will come in pair, male, female. And pretty soon, right, this is the mid to the end of the nesting season, and after nesting season, beginning in this month, and you'll see them in May, you'll begin to see all of our birds that stay here and that breed here are now bringing their chicks with them. So if you're a bird feeder, if you have bird feeder, this one won't come, but it'll still come to the yard. But you'll see young birds coming in. Well, I don't know what to say about this, except birds lack teeth and associated jaw bones. So their eating mechanism, their chewing mechanism, the way they harvest food is different from ours. They don't have teeth. They basically down the gut, but this could be interesting. It's interesting that not too many birds breed for life. They claim that eagles do. I don't know who they is. You know who they is. I default to they out there. Yeah, whoever the big they in heaven is. Science. Let's put it that way. Everybody believes the science. Very few species of birds are monogamous, but the big ones tend to be. Cardinals, yardbirds, things like that. They're not monogamous, they're polygamous. But they will stay loyal to the mate that they mate with to start with. Many species will and many won't. The guy just takes off and does nothing. They get a free ride. But they do serve a purpose of kind of drawing predators away from mom when she's trying to run the nest. In most cases, males have nothing to do with nest building or nurturing the young. Some species, and you'll hear about bluebirds later today, are an exception. The guy does help out. He helps with feeding, he helps with nest building, and he hangs around with her. And they probably are monogamous for the season, but next year, different deal. Promiscuous. Some species have very interesting mating habits, and usually that's colonial birds. Eggs, we know all about eggs, nourishment, ventilation, warmth, protection, and look at all the different shapes and sizes. A hummingbird egg is about the size of a Tic Tac. So if you pop Tic Tacs, that's about the size of a hummingbird. They're the same color, they want, at least the ones here. And but you can see there's one here that's very conical. I guess that's the right term. And it's my understanding from reading that you have a conical egg like that. Those birds, the big birds that nest on cliffs and stuff, they don't have a nice basket type nest. to keep the eggs all secure. They just lay them on a rock. And winds blowing across the air, and the eggs, if the egg got caught in the wind, it wouldn't roll straight around, it would roll in a circle, so. You know, God was looking out when he made the great plan. This evolution thing, whatever it was, whatever drove this is an evolutionary thing, that egg shape. And this is a bluebird nest, nice cup nest, and that is our general idea of what a bird's nest looked like. It's a cup made out of grass or something. But anyway, you know all this stuff. This one is another subject. It's really I call it predators versus prey. But look at the eye orientation when that barred owl, that's the owl that you hear back in the woods saying, "Who cooks for you at night?" And if you live in this part of Harris or Montgomery County, you have trees very close by, right? Everybody's got trees, big pine trees and big oak trees and big other trees. And these are the guys that you hear at night in all our neighborhoods and see at night. Look at how the eyes are on the front, just like ours. So they have that binocular vision and it focuses way out there on a point, except they have terrific night vision. Now look at this smaller bird. This is a yellow-throated vireo. It's another songbird. It does occur in Texas, during migration, but also breeds in Texas. Again, not in the cities necessarily, but in the woodlands around you. And vireo, V-I-R-E-O, and that yellow-throated got its name from its appearance. And, you know, some biologists named it. I mean, it didn't come out to the first explorer with a name tag on the front. And so some biologists doing a survey, and they did. We had U.S. Biological Survey all through the 1800s, 19th century. Most of these birds were named back then. And for instance, Lewis and Clark, when they left Western Pennsylvania and went all the way to Portland, Oregon, over a 2-year period, one of the men on it was Clark. No, it was Lewis. Lewis cataloged everything he saw. He had journalists that he would run into something no European had ever seen coming out of the eastern U.S. And you know, they were sent on that mission by Thomas Jefferson. And Lewis actually went to Jefferson's home in Monticello in Virginia and spent about 2 weeks being mentored by the president because he wanted him to identify every animal he saw and plant. So they weren't just trying to look at territory, they were also cataloging. Anyway, see where the eyes are on that yellow-throated vireo? They're on the side. So they have almost 360-degree vision. Not quite 360, but if they just tilt their head a little bit, just turn their head a little bit, they can see all the way around. We can't do that. What is our vision? 170 degrees, less than 180 is all we can see through our peripheral vision. Here are just bird groupings and Krien, you found that you composed this slide.
I did.
I found it on there.
Yeah, no, it was just, again, just trying to show that, you know, as birds have evolved over the eons, I mean, there's different groups. I mean, you have your typical, if you just sort of read through the list, I mean, you've got your bird, you know, the birds that you see at your bird feeder are typically both perching birds. When you see a bird on the feeders on the ground, which are quails Am I giving up something here?
I think they muted themselves. We're good?
Yeah. You know, the raptors are clingy, you know, this just helps, you know, people sort of group birds in terms of how they, you know, the environment they live in, how they live. And so you got the birds on the land, you got birds in the water, you got different classes of birds. From the water, from that perspective, we saw the picture of the great blue heron earlier. You got those herons, the egrets, the ibises, the cranes, these are all in that wetland type of habitat. You've got your ducks, which are either your freshwater or seawater, so they're either, you know, divers or not. You got, you know, the perching water birds, which are your cormorants, but they'll be in the water, but they are diving, but they'll also perch. Then you got your gulls, and then going out onto underwater, which are the penguins. And then you've got the pelagic albatross. There's a comment about the albatross when Jim was talking about the wing shape for the albatross, you know, was that long, narrow wing. Well, some albatrosses they come to land, they breed, they lay their eggs, they take off, and they're basically in the air for 6 months. They may land in the water once in a while, but pretty much they're soaring 24/7, 365. So they need these long wings that allow them just to, they're not beating the wings, they just, you burn up energy. Those wings, it's like a glider, it just allows them just to, without using their wing muscles much, just by sort of tilting their whole body and just shifting, they just pick up the wing currents and they'll go halfway around the world, just I'm all on a lazy day surviving without using a lot of energy, but that's why that wing was evolved the way it is. Very unique.
And going and picking up with what he just described about the albatross at sea. I'm sure many of you have been driving down 45 or driving down something. And you see about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, not at daybreak. It'll be up in the morning after the heat of the sun has hit the earth and the hotter air is starting to rise from the ground. Thermals, you'll start to see about 9 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock, you'll start to see the black vultures, mainly black vultures, they begin to congregate in colonies and they disperse for the day, but you'll see them coming up and they'll be kind of doing one of those deals, and they're riding thermals to get elevation. And you know, that's very common and not dissimilar from what the albatross does. They use what they have, and they've evolved that way. You don't have any albatross here in Montgomery County. You don't even have, I don't think they have any in the Gulf of Mexico. They don't know. Don't think so. Anyway, that's just a reminder summary of the variability and of bird species. And if we've got 350 here, different bird species, we've got everything from hummingbirds, not the albatross, but we have bald eagles, we have about 6 or 8 species of hawk, some only in the summer and some year round. And it goes on and on. This is really stepping into Krien's presentation. I'll just advertise Birdcast. How many have looked at Birdcast?
I love that thing. Yeah.
And isn't that amazing?
Oh,
It's
that's cool.
absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
I'll go ahead and describe Birdcast. This is a map of the United States. By the way, this is another map of the United States, and this shows that this is a photograph from a satellite. That's what America, that's what the United States looks like at night, on a clear night. So you can tell where the cities are. Right there's Houston. And way up there at the top of it's Conroe. And right down at the bottom of it, you can see where Galveston sticks out. All that is light. You've heard of lights out. You're seeing a lot of publicity about lights out. It not only applies to birds, it applies to insects. and to some extent to other critters. But insects are also known now, we're beginning to study it. It's decimating insect populations, our night lights. Well, this is not night lights here. This is a radar scope. Radar scope, and all those little green dots. All those little green dots are radar stations at near a major airport. Like, where's Cheyenne? Here's Wyoming. I don't know, Cheyenne's down here. I don't know what that is, but
It's in the southeast corner.
yeah,
Kind of a
Cheyenne,
down,
yeah, Cheyenne's over here, so I don't know what that would be, what city would be up there. But
well,
here's Denver,
Kind of,
okay?
maybe.
Let's, Denver's up in here someplace. Houston's down in here. This is radar, weather radar, Doppler radar. The same radar that's, in fact, this is coming, these images are used, are provided by the various radars are brought together. And I don't know what the technology is, but basically, these are reflections off of, guess what? Birds, individual birds. Doppler radar is so sensitive, it can be tuned down, can be adjusted to a certain adjustment, and I don't know anything about the technology. This is bird flight at night, and this particular one was 6th of May this year, a month ago. 6th of May was a Saturday, right? And this was about 1 a.m. Eastern time. So this is about 12:30 our time. There's a great big hole at Dallas. And I've always wondered what's going on. The real bright colors are numbers of birds. And according to the chart here, this is on the internet. You can just go to Birdcast and this pops up. And it's, you can see it. I think it reflects every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes is another image. And you can show bird flight at night in North America, or at least in the United States. I'm sure they can do it for Canada. 800 million birds in flight at this time. Whoops, let me go back. Whoops. Anyway, Krien's going to talk about migration. Here's just another tool. Another tool, radar, for studying birds and migration. I'm going to stop. Do we want to take a 5-minute break real quick? So he can get adjusted into his part of the program. I will probably come back. If our timing works out right, maybe I'll be back on for another 15 or 20 minutes and we'll talk. I've got a little run on the environmental issues, why birds are in trouble. And let's just turn it over right now. 5 minutes?
5 minutes, guys.
Back in their chairs and both of their chairs and they're awake, they're ready to take a nap. Been a long goal for you guys in this program. What is it, the last class?
Second to last.
Second to last class. Congratulations for surviving this long. It does take an effort, but as Jim was saying, it's something that we do it because it's something we like. It's something we want to learn more about. It's an interest that we have and develop and so on. I really got into birding only since I retired, which was in end of 2013. I retired like January 1st, 2014, and I think the Master Naturalist class started in February back then. And I went through the class in 14. As soon as I got out of work, I had a chance to say, now I can do what I really want to do. And that's to get back outside. I had spent 30, 40 years in the business world. Part of my job is traveling around the country doing presentations. Like one story I tell about the presentations is when I took the job, I moved to Houston in 2000 from Wisconsin. I'm a Michigan native, went to Michigan State, My degree is in Parks and Recreation. I thought I was gonna be a park ranger when I was in college. I wanted to get into that, because I always enjoyed the outdoors. My junior year, the counselors and our people were saying in the program, look at, we got all these job openings, there's 30 people graduating, we got all these job openings for park and rec majors. I go, we're doing good. Senior year came up, the guy pulls out the drawer, he says, I got 5 openings and I got 300 kids graduating. I go, oops. Not so smart. I mean, I just made a program in the business world, and that's where I was until 2014. But got into this and really started enjoying birding, and about 5-6 years ago, I had taken, there was a program, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, it's the Academy for Lifelong Learning through Lone Star. It's a program for basically 55 plus people that they provide they offer all these different courses. There is a $25 a year registration fee. Classes are free. They're held a lot of them are held on the Lone Star campuses, not just in down by the Woodlands. That's the campus I work out of. But they do classes at various locations. Topics range from A to Z. But I took a birding class 15 years ago from a gal there, and then after about a year or so, taking it, she says, "Well, I'm moving to the hill country. We need somebody to keep the class going." I says, "I enjoy birding. I don't know anything about teaching a class. I've never done it." He says, "Here's my PowerPoint. Just go through the PowerPoint. Don't worry about it. All you gotta do is just my slide." So I did, and so I started that, and I now sort of developed my own sort of way of doing those classes. And so I now do 2 classes each fall, which is an intro to birding, like how do you use your binoculars. And also then what's called an advanced birding, which is just taking it one step further. Let's talk about hummingbirds. Let's talk about waterfowl. Let's talk about raptors. Let's talk about woodpeckers. Let's talk about national wildlife refuges, whatever. And then in the spring, or I should say basically late winter, I do 2 more classes. And those are both considered quote unquote advanced classes. It's just taking other topics other than here's the binoculars and here's the bird book type of thing. And so I jumped all over the place, and I've been doing that now for about 6 years. And having fun. And at the end of each session, this is the fall semester, the winter semester, after we do the 2 classes, I'll do a bird walk. And so we go out and spend 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it is, at a location nearby, and just see what we can see. So we're doing that and on an ongoing basis. I just wrapped up my spring bird walk back in April. This year we went to Shelter Lake State Park. I would recommend that people, anybody been to Shelter Lake in terms of just to sort of, I'll use the term, go look at birds, because it's a great place to go. It's flat level. You got the old fish, it used to be a fish hatchery for the state of Texas years and years ago. Now it's just, they've been deserted. It's a state park, but you've got all these level trails that go around all these fish, the old fish ponds. They have a 4-story observation deck that overlooks Shelter Lake. They've restored about 500 acres into a coastal wetland prairie, and they're continuing to do that. It's a great place to go to see birds, and it's not that far away. There's no state park, but there's no entrance fee. So
Where's it at?
it's off Garrett Road. From here, I go down to Beltway around 99, Beltway around, just hang a left, go east as it spins down south. Garrett Road, you just hang a left, and it's about a mile down the road off of the tollway. As you go down south of the Woodlands here, just pick up the tollway, go east. It's not the inner belt, it's the outer belt. You go ahead towards the east, yeah, you're heading east, and it's just down and around. So you go, as soon as the thing curves from going east to heading south, and about a mile south, it's the Garrett Road exit. You turn left on that Garrett Road, and it's about a mile further east, not even a mile to the entrance to the state park. And it's a great place to bird. Different times of year, different things. One of the things someone had mentioned Jim mentioned that somebody said there was a limpkin. Up in what county were you talking about? You said there was one roaming around.
Missouri County, I know, but somebody said Shelby, there's.
Sheldon Lake State
There's a
Park, so
limpkin
where
here.
I was leading to, Sheldon Lake State Park, they now
And
had
there's limpkin
limpkins.
breeding at Sheldon.
They're now, they now breeding in
More than.
the state park. These birds originally came from Florida. You know, and one of their food sources, you know, is apple snails. They're a snail. Well, apple snail is an invasive species that we have here, but the birds have figured out there's a lot of apple snails over here. A lot of them, so for us, gladly, let's take in them because they're now helping us control the population of invasive snails, the apple snail. They've had them in the state park for at least 3 or 4 years. I've seen them the past Christmas. I did a bird count over there on and I saw 4 different lumpkins. I was there in April for my bird walk. I then saw or heard 4. So they're there about 3 weeks ago at the Lakeside Park, right behind the Buckaloo Elementary School, right here in the Woodlands. There's the Air Branch Reservoir back there. There's Lakeside Park is down in Lakeside Park, where they got the soccer field and all that down there. They've been singing them in that reservoir behind Buckaloo this spring. And I didn't see it that day, but I heard it. Heard it call a couple different times. So it's in there too now. They've been hanging out in there this morning a little bit. So they're coming into this part of the state more than they have in the past. So it's been pretty unique and it's been an interesting process. But anyhow,
Brazos Bend also has limpkins.
President, so they're coming. They're actually, they've seen a couple of even as final as I got to Oklahoma now. They go where the food sources are. And that's, you know, as we talk about birds and migration and where the habitat where they live, they have to adapt and they have to learn where they find food. So that's what's happening with actually the limpkin, which is sort of a good thing. So my initial presentation here, I call it a year on the wing. A year in the life of a bird. So I'm talking about different things that go on over sort of a 12-month cycle. That is what bird species go through. It varies from species to species, how much of this they do, what impacts they run into, problems they see, and so on. So let's just sort of get into this thing. Come on. It's not working. What way is this one?
Take it.
There, now we, I don't know what happened here. Yeah, okay. Of all the marvels really in the living world, I mean, the idea that understanding how birds move, I mean, what do we do from year to year? We move, how much do we migrate? It's from the sofa to the kitchen. Or to go down to the office. That's a big migration. A real big migration might take a trip somewhere. But typically we're pretty. We're solid. We just sit here. We just get on our butts and we don't go anywhere. And we can live there. We have our food's here, our shelter's here. Whatever we need is right there in our house. But on the HEB, go to the CVS, whatever we got to do to get what we eat. And that's it. Don't worry about this. The world of a bird is totally different. They can't just sit someplace and like, you know, everything just sort of handed to them. You know, I don't have a job, I'll go live with mom in the basement. Yeah. These little guys, as soon as they're born, you know, they get kicked out of the nest and take off. Mom and dad leave them and they're on their own. You know, 3 months of age. A young hummingbird up in southern Canada decides in August, maybe it's time something tells me I gotta start flying south. There's not a tern around, there's not another hummingbird around. That little guy or gal just wakes up one morning and says, I gotta start eating a whole lot of food, I gotta get ready to fly. Where am I going? I don't know, but I gotta go now. Think about our kids at 3 months or 22 years of age, they don't know where they're going. Wow, what am I gonna do, you know? Anyhow, so this migration is really just a phenomenon. it's a nature that's just beyond where sometimes our ability to understand it all, but the grand scheme of things, it's out there and it works. So this idea, take a little hummingbird, which weighs about the weight of a dime, flying thousands of miles every year, one way, so that a round trip can be several thousand miles. Is pretty unique, and the amount of energy and what it takes to do that is just, it's hard to comprehend. So what happens, so it's starting at sort of the beginning of the year, it's wintertime in different parts of the world. Summertime in other parts of the world, but migration can be going either way, but we'll start with sort of the winter and end of the winter. These birds suddenly are thinking, it's time to go. I've been down here, or I've been where I'm at in the wintertime. Typically, that's in a non-breeding location. We think of the birds as they migrate through here in the spring. Where are they coming from? Further south, typically. So they've been down in Central America. They've been down in South America. They may have been almost to the tip of South America in Argentina. And they decide they're genetically something in them that says it's time to go. We got to start eating more because I got to build up reserves so that I can have energy to be able to fly how many thousands of miles. They start to congregate. Some birds start to congregate in flocks, so they can do it together. They don't want to fly solo, so they start coming together. They start eating, and they start saying, "I got you ready to go." They're getting restless. They're adding weight, so on. They're doing this. Some birds, such as a hummingbird, may gain 30 or 40% of their body weight. Just barely, and they have to continuously keep doing this throughout this migration. So let's look at this particular bird here. This is the American golden plover. This bird is it's a long distance migrant, which means it isn't just moving like from northern United States to southern United States or Canada down to Mexico. This guy's going from Central South America up into northern Canada, almost to the Arctic Circle. So this little guy is putting on a lot of mileage each way. But there's about 330 species that breed in the US and Canada that are considered these long distance migrants. They go a ways. And so this guy is this is the male, this is what he looks like when he's in his prime and eating plumage. And getting ready and he starts heading north. So they said they winter down in southern South America, and they're going to head up into the northern parts of Alaska and Canada, like I say, up to the Arctic Circle, and they're on the tundra in northern Canada. So think about how many, 5,000-6,000 miles from south part of Argentina, not South America, to that northernmost point that they go to. Now they don't do it. They don't get on I-45 or I-35 and go straight north or straight south. They do what's called sort of a circular route of migration. And you can see from here when they're non-breeding down in South America, they're ready to head north. What do? They start going a little bit to the northwest, heading towards basically the coast of South America on the Pacific coast side of South America, up through the Caribbean, across the Gulf. We'll get them through here on the spring migration. They come through Montgomery County. You see them out on Katy Prairie, and they go up through this, right up through the center of the country, all the way up to the Arctic Circle. And part of this is they're going along as the weather allows these birds. They don't want to get ahead of the weather because they don't want to get to a point where there's not insects, or the flowers aren't blooming, or there's not food. So they're following as the weather keeps getting nicer as they head north. They keep going with that. But they want to get there. So, and the males, a lot of these species want to make sure they get there as quickly as they can because they want to get the best territory and be able to defend it. So when the females show up, they're ready to go and say, "Hey, look, dear, I've got this great place for us to stay. I got this great territory. It's got a lot of food. Come join me." They do this, but on the comeback, they don't go back down through the southern part of the United States. They head up over towards the Atlantic Ocean and head up over towards Maine, and they kick off from that point of the United States. And they fly nonstop across the Atlantic, and they don't hit land until they get to South America. That's a nonstop flight of a couple thousand miles. So think how much, your wings are going, you're burning up energy, you're exercising yourself a hell of a lot during that long flight. So this is a typical migration of this golden plover. So typically, honestly, yes, ma'am.
Why are they doing that? Are they following weather patterns or to make it easier to fly? Like, why would they not come back down the same way they went?
Good
Is
question.
that typical for birds?
Good question as to, why do some birds fly a circular route versus not? And, what's the advantage or disadvantage to it? I think, this is just me speaking, as Jim was saying, neither one of us have degrees in ornithology or biology. So what I'm saying is what I think what I've learned is I've read other articles, or, like your presentations from other people that are the experts. I listen to a lot of presentations by the folks from ornithology. And so there I'm listening to guys that are PhDs and so on and so forth. But again, I think heading north, it's a way of, again, following the food, making sure they get there. There's a good food source. They got to be strong. When they get to where they're breeding, they don't want to be worn out because they got to be able to be strong enough to want to defend the territory, crack the mate, so on and so forth. On the comeback, I just want to get the hell out of this cold weather and go get back down where it's warmer. And it's just they have no other reason to be going other than this to get down to where their final destination. So part of it is just the cycle of life between making sure their ability to breed when they get to their northern breeding grounds and southbound is just getting down there and there. And some of it is wind current, some of it is weather, because weather does have a big impact on migration. No matter what bird it is, be it this guy or be a hummingbird or be a hawk, the weather is a big impact to that. So I'm going to touch a bit on this. So what is this migration? Do all birds migrate? We'll hit that. Or why do they migrate? Where do they go? Do they follow established routes like this guy, this plover? They have a route. We're going to look at another bird that has like a totally different concept of how the routes that they follow. What's the mode of migration? So sort of when are they doing it? Night, day? How do they know where they're going? They don't have their little, they don't pull out this guy and say, oh, Google Maps, how the hell do I find the Wendy's? How do I get there? They don't have one of these guys. Whatever, all they have is whatever's up here. It's just genetic. It's inbred. It's there. Or are they learning? Or some of it is learned. Some birds migrate in families, so that you think about when I was a kid living in Michigan. I mean, every fall and spring, it was the big thing. It was the flocks of the Canadian geese going overhead. The big long bees. You know that the lead bird is the old bird that knows it's done the migration numerous times, knows where to go, how to get there. The ones at the back end of the V are probably the young ones from that year. They're just following mom and dad and grandpa down to wherever they're going and back. And they'll learn. They may ultimately be the lead bird in a couple of years, who knows? But they learn the migration. That little hummingbird I talked to you about a minute ago, that's just it's in the genes. They just know they got to get up and they know they got to go. There's nobody there to teach them. Their parents abandoned them as soon as they're able to fly. Parents are gone. The little one's on its own. But that little one knows how to get down to Central America for the winter, and then they come back to that same spot in Canada next spring. How the hell they do it? I don't know, but something up in their gene, they're able to do it.
You can say anything about my discovery on hummingbirds,
What?
the flight path,
Oh,
migration, save that for another time.
we can hit that a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Just remind, and it's in how far do some of these birds travel? We already know that this golden plover has a pretty big flight itinerary. So what is migration? Get right down to it. That's like we believe in the science. So let's look at whatever science we want to use, but it's this cyclical periodic travel from, basically from one point to another. It's starting at some place, going to another location and coming back. You can either start these, you can either say, well, I'm gonna start with the migration from where you're saying in the winter, which is during their non-breeding location. They're vacationing on the beaches and all over South America, Central America, whatever. And so they go, well, vacation's over, gotta go, and we're gonna go to where our breeding grounds are. Spend the time breeding. At some point, they're gonna say, let's go back to the beach. We're done breeding and do it. So it's usually typically the seasonal, because obviously that has a big impact on why they have to leave. And typically it's a year cycle. So they, as I said, they start from the non-breeding, do the migration, they breed, they have their fall migration, and then they're back to that non-breeding territory. Do all birds migrate? Not all. We have birds here, like for example, in Texas, they're here year round. They're not migratory. But some of those birds, the species of birds that we say are here year round, there's also birds of that same species that do migrate. We have crows here year round. There's probably more crows here in the winter than there's during the summer. And some of them are coming down here for the migration. Same with like blue jays. You get a lot of blue jays, but they're not all resident, even though we see blue jays all year round. Some of them are migrating in and out of here. So that happens. But the more severe the climate, the more likely it is for birds to migrate because of the climate. Obviously, we'll look at that. 2/3 of the species that we talked about in the United States, typically will migrate. Some may be only a short distance, some of them a real long distance. So, so why are they migrating? You said, they're down on the beaches in South America, and then why are they migrating to the north? Well, they want to breed, and when they're breeding, they're also raising a family. What do they need? They need the habitat, they need the food source, they want to protect the young. And if all the birds just stayed in Central America, they'd be fighting each other every 2 seconds because there wouldn't be enough food, there wouldn't be enough space to breed. How do you protect the young? So the birds say, I want to get the hell out of here. There's just too many people. I want to go someplace where there's more open space, there's more food. I have a better chance of breeding, I have a better chance of my young surviving. And then we'll come back down here and vacation again next year. But right now, I got to go someplace else where I can raise my family. There's this less competition. Climate is a little milder. It's not quite as hot in the northern parts of Canada as it is in on the equator, in Central America, south parts of northern South America, and so on. So, and also the daylight's longer. Think about it. The endless day, and in the upper parts of Alaska and Canada during the summer, where basically the sun is up, what, 23 hours of the day or something. It's never dark. Well, what happens when you got sunlight? What do flowers and insects like? That's when they're growing. That's when they're living. So there's a lot more food available in that short period of time of the endless summer and endless daylight in northern parts of Canada and in the Yukon and the Arctic area. So, and it's spread out. You don't have as much competition for space and there versus not. So, thinking about that, what triggers the migration? Same thing. If those birds are down in South America, like that plover, when their days start getting shorter, that's what triggers them to come north. Same thing when we talk about spring migration in the fall, the days get short up north, that daylight triggers them to head the opposite direction. So daylight is a big trigger for these birds when they just know that they can sense when the days are starting to get a little bit shorter than they were yesterday or the week before. They just know it's time to go. Temperatures start to drop. Who wants to be in upper Canada in the wintertime? It's colder than you know what up there. You don't want to be up there. There's no food, there's no light. I'm gonna get the hell out of Dodge. So temperature can be a kickoff. Food supplies. Again, if it gets cold, the insects aren't going to survive. Flowers aren't going to survive. There's not nectar, there's not food. Why am I going to stay here? I got to go where food is. They start heading south because there's still food available. And then it's that genetic disposition. Something tells them. Some birds will start to migrate, even though you say, geez, it's nice weather. Why are you moving? Why would a hummingbird in August say it's time to start heading south? Well, it's nice. I mean, the weather's nice in Minnesota or Canada. I mean, that's the best time to be up there. It's not freezing, but it's not as hot down here. But they just know that come August, it's time to start moving. Even though the weather really hasn't changed, days aren't getting that much short. That's not the weather. It's just, they know they gotta start moving. So that's the genetic kick in. So where do they go? And obviously, if you're a permanent resident, it's like you and I, we're permanently in our house. We don't migrate, so we're there. There are some birds that are called elevational migrants. I don't know, like go out into the Rocky Mountains. They may be up at the top of the Rocky Mountains at 10, 12,000 foot elevation. Come wintertime, they go, this is a wee bit cold. I gotta move. I want to get someplace where it's a little bit warmer. So what do? They just drop down to 5,000 foot elevation instead of 10 or 12,000. They don't leave the state. They don't leave the mountains. They're just dropping in elevation where it's not as cold and there's potentially more food. There may be food available, love those bird feeders and so on down in people's backyards, down in the valley, rather than being up on top of the mountain peaks. So those are elevational migrants. They don't go very far except they drop 5,000 feet in elevation instead of 5,000 miles across the ocean. Short distance migrants, again, they're just sort of within this, people that birds that fly from northern United States. Let's look at ducks, for example. Ducks will breed up in North Dakota, South Dakota, along the Canadian border to southern Canada. And where do they migrate to? Typically down in the southern part of the United States. So they don't migrate for thousands of miles, but that's sort of considered more of a short distance migrants. And the medium distance, they may go from the middle of Canada through the United States, may end up out in Central America. And then the long distance, like the plover, goes from the Arctic to almost to the tip of South America. So that's a great or longer distance. So there's different. And so in the spring migration, let's look at another bird during its migration. And this is called the whooping crane. How many people are familiar with a little bit of the story of the whooping crane? 1930s and 40s, it got down to like 18 birds left of that species. I think now we're up to close to between captives and migrating flocks, where I think I'm around 700 or 800 if I remember correctly. And there's in us here in Texas, the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge down along the coast is their winter breeding grounds or wintering grounds. That's where they winter. They can fly down here from the Buffalo National Park up in northern Canada. So they are considered sort of a medium distance, and they come straight down. So this is the whooping crane here. Now, so I'm talking about sort of the I-40, the I-45 dog. They're a little bit more of an I-35 type of bird versus the plover that did this nice big circular route. These folks, they go from Alberta, Canada, in that Buffalo National Park. They'll fly pretty much a straight line to Aransas. Now that line is probably about 200-300 miles wide, but it's pretty much a straight shot back and forth. So it's been very important for the protection of these birds. And the ongoing is we want to have a place for them to survive when they get to Aransas. So that's why the Aransas National Park was established as their wintering grounds to have a place for them to be protected. And they have the Buffalo National Park in Canada. But what about along the way? I mean, they need to stop. This is not a non-stop flight. I mean, they're flying down. They got to stop over. They need food. They need rest, and so on. So places like the Platte River in Nebraska is a great stopover point, not just for whooping, but for salmon planes with tens and tens of thousands that go through there. That so we need to realize we need to protect not just where they are during the winter. We not just need to protect where they can breed, but we need to be able to protect the environment and the habitat on their route from point A to point B. So they have food, they have a place where they can stop and rest and not be harassed, or they've got food, they've got food and shelter, and they can replenish their energy sources, so on, and get their muscle mass back up a little bit, gain a little bit of weight so that they can continue their migration. So these guys go back and forth. So the main flock goes from Canada to us. There's another smaller group that go from Wisconsin down into northern Florida. There's also a small permanent flock in Louisiana. So these guys do a 5,000-mile round trip. So you need to stop several stopovers. We talked about the protection. We need to protect this like the Platte River and so on. So do these birds follow these established routes? We know that whooping crane does, pretty much know what the plover does. So they pretty much, most birds will follow pretty much that whatever pattern that they use to get from their winter grounds to their summers. As we said before, typically it's mostly north and south is the direction. Geological factors, ecological conditions and weather conditions determine these routes. That can vary depending on what's going on. That can change that. The majority travel broad airways within the flyway. Again, we talk about wind, weather. They can push them a little bit east, a little bit west, further north, further south. And also some of these routes, as we saw before, they go over large bodies of water. So in the United States, there's typically four major, what they call flyways. Starting on the right side of the Atlantic, so we'll follow sunrise and sunset across the United States, but going from east to west, you have the light blue. So you can see where, coming up out of South America, they'll either come up, hit this here in Mexico, then fly directly across the Gulf in the southern United States, or they'll come up from South America through the islands, Cuba, and then up, and they spread across northern Canada. The Mississippi Flyway, which is obviously because it typically follows the Mississippi through the continental U.S. But again, most of these birds that are coming up that flyway typically are coming up right across the Gulf of Mexico, again across the body of water up into the central United States and so on. The central flyway to the center part of the country, most of those birds follow the land course from South America, Central America, up through Mexico, follow the coast, and then head north as they come across the coast in Texas, and then pan out. But there's also birds that will come up this coast here, and then it's one of those shots from Birdcast will actually show that these birds will come up here, but then they'll end up way over here because they don't want to fly across the water, body of water. They follow landmass, and that's typically like the hawks. As Jim was talking about the thermals, we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, but those birds can't fly over thousands of miles, hundreds of miles of bodies of water. So they need to stay over land. So most hawks, no matter where they are in the United States, will come up and they just follow the landmass. And then when they get here, they'll either continue along the Pacific coast Pacific flyway, they'll come up to the central, or they'll hit turn a hard right here. They'll go all the way along the coast and all the way up to the center part of the United States. So these flyways, again, are just sort of a general way. These were initially started when they were tracking waterfowl. It wasn't because they were watching or figuring out where warblers go or whatever. This is the people, they were following the ducks and the geese and so on, was sort of the initial concept behind the flyways. It is just broadened out now across basically all bird species.
Yeah, borrow that. This is a good map. I'm going to tell you an anecdotal story. I'll try to get through this in about 3 minutes. I said before I was a bird bander. You put a ring on their leg with a unique number, and that bird then can be identified with that number from then on because it goes into a database. I also burned one of the species that I banned, or any of the hummingbirds. So I do ban mostly ruby-throated hummingbirds, which are the hummingbirds of the eastern U.S. The ruby throat range runs from about where this green is to the east. And that's their breeding range. They're here now. The hummingbirds you see in your yard are ruby-throated hummingbirds. I can assure you that's all you're seeing in your yard. In the wintertime, those guys go down to southern Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula, over into the mountains around in here. So their winter range is in southern Mexico. I've been involved in banding 4 individual hummingbirds. Three I caught and one was caught by a colleague of mine that I had banded. But anyway, there were 4 hummingbirds that were, whoops, back, no, forward. 4 hummingbirds that were banded in Western Illinois. Right in here is St. Louis, right there. They were banded within about 70 miles of St. Louis. I caught them in my yard in Houston County, Texas. 4 of them. 4 of them. And when I drew a line from St. Louis and Western Illinois, because the bander lived near Springfield, and he was banding in a perimeter around his home within 50 miles. When I took a line from St. Louis, right where he lived, right across Missouri, northwest Arkansas, to my place in East Texas, about 100 miles north of here, that was a straight line. And when I extrapolated that straight line, it banged into Corpus Christi. And we know from anecdotal knowledge that they come down the coast. But there is something about ruby-throated hummingbirds that are hatched up here in the Midwest, come right down through East Texas, down across the coast, and then down to their wintering grounds. And there was one more that was, darn it, hit the back forward. There was one more bird that was he had banded that was found in Arkansas. And when I drew the line on the map, it was right on that line. So there is something about, there is a corridor of some sort. There is something. Hasn't been necessarily explored or reported, but there's something.
Magnetism.
Pardon?
I think it's the Earth's magnetism.
It is. That's exactly what it is. Part of it. And it's, yeah, in part, and it's the genetics, their genetics, and their makeup of scenting the earth.
Right.
So it's their brain, mainly, right?
Yeah.
We think.
Yep. No, I'm with you.
Well, we've been reading books and we still don't.
And so again, as I was saying a little bit earlier with that golf in Mexico, do they do a trans golf or do they do a circum golf? You know, so are these birds deciding as they come up with the trans golf? I mean, are they a lot of this back and forth coming across either down along the Atlantic coast across Cuba into Central America, or come down across, yeah, they could kick off Louisiana, northeast Texas, and do a shot down towards the Yucatan, and then down into Central America in the fall or the spring. They follow this up and they come up and they start dispersing all different directions. If they're following, if they're more of a land bird that, you know, it just needs to follow that route. Once they get up in the United States, so the United States, then they can fan any direction they want to go. So with all this going on, but there are some bottlenecks. As we saw on that one map, all those birds that came up through the isthmus of Panama and, you know, Central America, Mexico, and up along the Gulf. That's a lot of birds through a very, very narrow slot of land. You think about how wide is that isthmus of Panama? It's only like 60 or 70 miles wide. So you got all these birds from South America that are following that route. You're funneling from this wide down to about this narrow. So there's a very deep, heavy concentration that go through that every year. And so twice a year, you have basically the sky black with birds because they're all staying in that sort of that 60-mile corridor through the isthmus. The raptors will go during the daytime because obviously they need the warmer air, the air currents to fly. At night, you'll have your warblers, thrushes, panthers, your smaller songbirds will migrate then, because we'll talk about why in a second. So these are just some numbers, for example, along the Gulf Coast. These numbers are a couple years old, but on average, 2 billion birds will cross the entire length of the Gulf Coast. So that's basically from Florida to where we are, you know, to Texas here. As they head north, The 18-day period that really is sort of the busiest is this April 19th to May 7th, that screenshot that Jim showed us earlier, May 6th, I think it was, they had like almost 800 million birds that night alone. On flight that night somewhere in the United States. So the biggest share of the birds will come through in that 2 to 3 week, about a 3-week period. But it can start as early as in March. There's still birds migrating south come May, end of May. So, but that's sort of the peak time. If you're really into want to see the spring migration, that's sort of the date you want to head to the coast, for example, go to High Island, go to Anahuac, go to Aransas, you name it. That's the place to be. Sabine Pass, places where you can really see the birds, a lot of birds in a very short period of time. Again, this is sort of, another just sort of a radar snapshot in that late afternoon of down here in our area, being the we're out the Gulf Coast. This is Galveston Bay down in here in Houston, and the Brazos River to the south. You can see these are birds coming in the evening. Not only you can tell by the color, it's not a real large concentration of birds are coming in. Now, little after sunset, here's that same area showing you the explosion of birds that have been on the ground all day, eating and resting and getting ready to take off for that night for the head north. So this really starts to show the explosion of birds. That Brazos River bottom is a great place where these birds can stop overnight, or during the day. They're resting, they're eating, getting ready. Sun goes down, boom, up they go, and they're on the fly. So this is a spring migrant. This is this is a sort of a set of screenshots, also from Birdcast. And this is from May 9th, a couple days after the one that Jim had. So I started out with this slide, and it shows that at around 1800 hours Eastern, which is what, 6 Eastern, so about 5 o'clock our time, we can see sort of there are some birds in flight already during the, they're in flight. That's what the sort of the light blue, the purples and the sort of the pinkish, but those are low numbers. And this shows here that at that point in time, there's only like 25 million birds sort of in flight at 5 o'clock our time across the United States. So we jump to 2000 hours Eastern, so that's around what, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock our time. There's still only about 20 million birds in flight at that point. We can see here, this is the sunset line. So we're getting light starting. So the birds are this, and these, and also with the thing, so with neat thing with Birdcast, within this, they'll start showing these little yellow arrows. So they're sort of showing this is the direction that these birds are taking. So these ones that are starting to move are heading up to the central part of the country, heading north at that time. So we go 2 hours later. This is 10 o'clock. This is now 8 o'clock our time. We've now jumped to 230 million from about 20 million. And again, we can see that the real high concentration along the coast. This Dallas area, I don't know why that Dallas area seems to have sort of a low number for whatever reason. Maybe they just don't like Dallas. They want to stay away from Dallas. I haven't figured that one out yet, but I've noticed that on several different shots that it looks to be right around that Dallas-Fort Worth area, the birds sort of go like this. Maybe they realize that Dallas is one of the top cities in the country that are dangerous to birds at night because of the lights. I don't know. Maybe someone figured that one out. I have no idea. But anyhow, you can see here where suddenly the birds are moving, and again, these arrows. I mean, this big concentration here. This is right along the Mississippi River. Not quite. Mississippi River is right on this side, but there's a high concentration of birds. And you can see them birds. Remember, I said before they would come up through Central Mexico, and those land birds would suddenly start taking off and heading to the east. They then fly across the water and get off the landmass. You come up here and you can see these yellow arrows really starting to go to the east. This concentration here are ones that are heading towards central US and Canada. You got a few that are heading a little bit more. So here's the sunset line now across the country. So at 9 o'clock our time, we've got about 230 million birds in flight on that night. At midnight, look at the concentration of birds in the central part of the United States. That bright yellow is just There's, we've got 660 million birds in the air at midnight across the United States.
The other black area, which was in the previous.
Right here, let's see here. Okay,
Kansas City.
okay, this is Missouri. This is Oklahoma.
Was on the other side.
So the other side was down here about where Dallas was. So these two dark spots, again, I'm not quite sure what would be here that would cause this.
Is it radar coverage?
This is Arkansas, this is Missouri.
Anomaly with the radar.
It could be that too, because those are two radar sites.
Anomaly with radar.
Yeah,
Probably reflects nothing about the bird.
so
Look back to the last. There,
Yeah.
it's sort of,
Must be different shape.
yeah, it's one of these, it's that radar spot right there and the radar spot right there. This is the radar spot out of Dallas.
Yeah, that's Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, because here's Arkansas, here's Missouri, here's Iowa, here's Kansas, Nebraska. So, yeah, there's, for whatever reason, again, yeah, sort of a dark spot here along the coast here too, so. Yeah, part of this may be the radar site, there's probably birds in the air, but the radar site just isn't picking it up.
Is that Scott in the middle of Texas?
Pardon?
Dallas is way out.
I don't know, it could be, I'm not sure. Anyhow, so we have 600, what do we have here, 660 million at 11 o'clock our time. An hour later, at midnight, we're up to 707 million birds in the air on that night. This is now the 10th of May, we've just gone past, it's just midnight our time. Again, now all of a sudden, those two spots that we thought we didn't have anything before, now we've got, the radar seems to, that's filled in for whatever reason, maybe just who knows what the radar was off longer, who knows what was going on for that 1 hour shot or a couple hours, it wasn't there, but now it seems to be picking up stuff.
And look at the course,
And so,
right on top of those spots, look at the course.
so you got these birds flying this way, now you're starting to pick up the birds along the coast over here, the Pacific Flyway. I mean, this is the mountain range up here, you don't have a whole lot here right on top of the mountains. But you've got a lot of birds in the air. You've got 707 million birds at basically midnight our time.
The other thing, go back real quick, I'll just say one thing. The big yellow swath up the center of the country is the Great Plains. That's the Great Plains right there.
Yeah, because you got the Mississippi River here, you got the Rocky Mountains here. This is the Great Plains, yes. And that's where the biggest food source, maybe food sources, water sources.
Yeah, there's more on the ground for them to feed on when they do come down. Because
Exactly.
they don't make that 3,000-mile flight in one night. They
No,
can't. They
you
don't
gotta
do
be
it.
able to hop, skip and jump. And so they're hop, skipping and jumping for food sources, water, and so on.
All those birds are only going 25 miles an hour, maybe 30 miles an hour with a tailwind. And so they're only making 200 or 300 or 400 miles a day. So they get up, go, back down, up, back, go, so they hop across the country.
Okay, so the next day, on May 10th, now, we're at, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 a.m. our time, we're back down to 296 million birds. So as it's getting towards sunrise, now this yellow line is sunrise, these birds are starting to come down. Some of them will be on the ground before the sun rises, other ones are, so you can see that here on this part of the United States, a lot of these birds, there were a lot of birds in flight during the night. Now there's nothing in the air. These birds have settled down. They're in for the day. They're relaxing. The day migrants haven't gotten up yet, and the night migrants have just gotten in there and they're hitting the ground. And so that's why it's sort of dark here for now. There's nothing coming up on this radar, but you still have the central part of the country going because they're still moving.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So you said there are day migrants and night
Yeah,
migrants?
I'm gonna get, have a slide coming up on that.
Okay.
I don't answer your question in a minute. You're jumping the gun on me. You're too smart for me. Just hold on a second.
Are you?
Where the states coming from that all have radars, so they're the same radars from weather, I would superimpose the weather on top of things, because it might not be one picking up the birds, two. It's tornado season in May, so you might be supposed to be seeing a super seldom tornadoes running around. So if you superimpose, and that might be more smooth data.
Okay, so what she's implying to say, and bring up, which is a good point, we talk about migration was impacted by weather. Weather may be strong storms, tornadoes, whatever. You have a strong front going through, and I did see something, I think it might have been the same way one of these weekends, where the there was some severe weather down in through here. It's one night, so it did impact where birds were flying at that particular point in time because of that. And or if the winds were strong enough, they may, some birds that were taking a tailwind, they may end up scooting a little bit to the east because it's easier flying with the wind at their back than going to heading. They may have wanted to head up this way, but the winds, the headwinds are too strong. So they said, well, I'm going to take a little deviation to the east because I can fly a lot faster and not have to burn up as much energy. So wind, weather, if we do have, you know, a tornado during hurricanes, it has been shown that during hurricane season, there are birds that are on the coast. They actually will leave the coast before the hurricane hits. We haven't even put out a hurricane warning. There's some birds going, I gotta get the hell out of here. There's gonna be some nasty weather in about 4 days. And they haven't issued the tornado warning yet on the hurricane. And they're already up and out of there. Because that type of that type of weather, the air pressure, the wind, it affects the birds. And so, and they can sense some stuff that before we do. And so they'll react to it before we even know what's going on. They're making moves. How many times have you seen birds in your neighborhood or whatever? You know, there's rain coming or a storm coming, you know it, and suddenly all the birds will flock to my bird feeders. And 3 hours later, it's raining like Billy be damned, but they came on ahead of time, ate early that day, then headed for someplace where we shelter. Have you ever noticed that, or did you ever think? And all said, no, that makes sense. You know, the weather's changing the weather. You know, so we can learn a lot from birds and vice versa. Yes, Jim.
Here's another factoid, if Krien hasn't mentioned it, most of the songbirds fly at an elevation between a few hundred, like 200 or 300 or 400 feet above the surface, to maybe 5,000, which approximates a mile, but most of them down lower. So the songbirds, millions of songbirds are not flying that far above the ground. So they are really being subjected to surface weather conditions. And just remember that part. And if you're going to give anybody credit, if you haven't credited Cornell University, this technology in part, in fact, in most, Cornell University is the academic brain trust of ornithology, at least for North America. They, you know, that's in New York. That bothers you, so be it. Cornell has their ornithology department is just head and shoulders above, or they are the leaders, let's put it that way. There's many good ornithology departments, including the A&M. I guess, I don't know what they do. Can't win football games.
All right.
Not enough.
Okay, so we know that we can see how this changes, and then by sunrise, we're back to 45 million. So these are the nighttime migrants, and Jim was saying these are mostly songbirds that are doing at that time of that's their cycle versus. And so during the spring, I like to throw in a couple pictures of birds just to sort of break up the monotony here. Orange crown warblers, yellow rump warblers, we have them here during the winter. During the spring, they start heading north, but there's more of a medium distance because these will head into northern US and into southern Canada to breed. We talked about stopover sites that are really important. Again, these birds that they're traveling thousands of miles and need a place to get food and shelter. This just shows a couple being down along because of the northern coast of South America with all those birds coming up, hitting the isthmus of Panama, and then it shows that, you know, why the Gulf Coast of Texas is so important, because there's a lot of birds that either come up around the coast through Mexico and Texas, or they come across the Gulf, they hit Texas. So the Texas coast is a very, very, very important habitat for migrating birds. About 95% of the birds that migrate, come across that Texas coast area at some point in time. So it's very important that we protect that and realize we need to do something. Here, this goes a quick, watch the purple dots. This is a year of migration. Again, from Cornell, I can see where all this goes across the United States. We're into May, June. Start seeing it. Okay, by July, birds are starting to move around in Canada, thinking, getting ready to go south, some of them, because it's getting changing. Now they're coming down back to the United States in October, getting across the Gulf, coming down through Mexico, the end of the year, there they are. So again, this is another illustration of this pattern of these birds going from north to south, south to north. So we talked about the impact of weather. Think about that little bird, that little hummingbird. If there are some hummingbirds that fly across the Gulf rather than down along the coast, all around. So they're out in the Yucatan Peninsula and they're going, I've got to go that way. And the Texas coast is that way. It's about a 500-mile flight across the Gulf. Hummingbird being other birds as they come up across. And when you're in the Yucatan, it's a nice, beautiful day on the beach. The sun's out, they're eating whatever, relaxing. And at evening time comes, they go, they sense all the weather. Wind seems to be okay. I think it's right for me to go. They get up and they start flying. They get halfway, 2/3 way across the Gulf. All of a sudden, they hit a strong headwind coming out of the west or northwest. It's going, oh man, what was a nice easy flight now is I got to beat my wings twice as fast and only go half as far. And I'm still making progress, but it's getting very slow. I may have started out at 500 or 600 feet or 1,000 feet. And some of these birds, by the time they hit the Gulf Coast of Texas, they might be like 4 feet above the ground, above the water, barely alive, because they burned up all the energy, maybe burned up muscle tissue, trying to make landfall. So some of these birds, if they were intending to maybe go nonstop further to the United States, they've got to bail to the nearest land, and that land may be the Texas Gulf Coast. So these are what they use the term of sort of these fire escapes. They need to be able to find land if they're out over water, to be able to come down, get food, have some shelter, and be able to recover from that what they ran into. So we need this habitat protected along the Gulf Coast, which us great humans don't like to do. So we have Texas, and a couple of comments here. We have one of the most biodiverse yet threatened coastlines in the country. We have over 600 miles. Much of the coast is suffering from erosion, lack of fresh water, and pollution. What does that sound like? A lot of environmental issues that everybody talks about, but they don't seem to want to do a whole hell of a lot about. This region is wintering grounds and the stopover. Like I said, about 98% of the long range migratory birds come through here, so they need protection. They need a fueling stop. But also the coast is a stopping grounds for litter pollution carried to the river system, meaning many of the conservation issues on the coast are at the mercy of what happens above us. What comes from, the Brazos River, what comes down, the San Jacinto, and so on from the central part of the country, the central part of the state comes down and ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. One of the other litter pollutions, in addition to what's coming down the rivers that we got to worry about, or water that's not coming down the river because it's all the fresh water is being used by farmers and municipalities and so on. So by the time it trickles to the Gulf, it's very much a trickle. The other pollution problem along the coast is actually coming from the Gulf, coming out of the Gulf and hitting the shore because of the way of the currents in the Gulf. Where I was down in Corpus a couple of summers ago, down on sort of the northern end of the South Padres, and talking to some of the folks there, they were saying that you go down to a lot of the litter that's on the beach. That litter is coming out of Mexico, it's coming out of the Caribbean islands, it's coming from other parts of the Caribbean, and as the currents carry that trash and the plastics and all that stuff that's floating around, it comes around and then gets slammed up onto our beaches in Texas. So, it's a problem even outside, we're getting polluted from outside, actually from outside the United States coming into our state, and we're having to live with that stuff. So this is the sort of the spring stopover habitat from, Marjorie, these are just all the various areas along the Gulf Coast, starting over from basically, this is, where's my spotter here? Here's your Louisiana over in here, and it goes all the way down to Brownsville. So we know there's the habitat here is of concern and necessity for that. So one of the things that help protect the coast, which we've seen to in the United States, not just in Texas, but you go along parts of Florida, and you go along the Atlantic coast, is all your short coastal islands or barrier islands, but they were really historically, in the head severe weather, these barrier islands would take the brunt of that impact of the hurricane or whatever, slow that high water down, sort of stop and kick the wind. It would help protect the mainland, because they would take the brunt of the storm, and the inland wouldn't be as badly damaged. But what have we humans done in our great desire to have a house on the beach? We take over all these barrier islands, we build all these buildings. And suddenly, as these islands before would move too, they would be created and then they'd be washed away and recreated as the sand in the currents and then moved around. Well, we in Elizabeth decided we're going to build seawalls, we're going to protect these islands, we're going to put all these buildings up, yada, yada, yada. And what happens? Then everybody screams, well, there's billions of dollars worth of damage. It's gotten worse. Everything's going bad. Hell in a handbasket. Well, why? Because you were an idiot and put your house on the beach. And who all pays for it? You and I, the insurance, we pay house insurance, and we're paying for these idiots on the beach. I'll get off my soapbox. So these coastal islands are always been and will always be very important to the habitat. It's not just birds, it's fish, it's animals, it's you and I. We needed those, we need those, and we need to protect them, we need to stop this constant destruction of these islands along the various coasts. And because these birds use them because there's a great place for them to stop over for migration, but they're also a great place to breed. You have a lot of rookeries on these islands because what's the ability to have a location where the predators, they're not gonna have as many predators on an island in the Gulf as if you were sitting in Sheldon, Sheldon Lake State Park, where you're trying to have a very rookery, but you've got coons and foxes and what have you that could get at your nest. On this island, you're pretty much, unless that one wants to swim across the Gulf, you get to the island, the predators are not as great. So it's a way for them to, the birds love them because they use it for nestings. So these islands will change. They talk about sea rising, sea level rising. Sometimes I don't know. I will tell you, on one hand, people say that the sea levels are rising. There's other people that say there's places down in the Florida Keys. The islands are 6 feet above sea level. In 1932, they were 6 feet above sea level. In 2022, they're still 6 feet above sea level. Nothing's changed. You go to the next person who says, it's all the land is sinking, New York was going to be underwater. The only reason why New York may be, Long Island may be going under the water, because there's a gazillion tons of buildings that are just pressing the land force down to the ground.
Same with Miami.
And, or even here, we see it in Texas, where when they were drilling for oil or so on, you pull the water out from underneath the ground, you create, and that thing sinks. So we've had, land actually drops because of what we've taken out from underneath it. So, is it climate? And off my soapbox. So the birds like it because it's a secluded spot, like I said, to raise chicks. But they are becoming very crowded with buildings, boats, other things that make up. We want the coastal life. The salt life is that one sticker I see on people's cars and trucks all the time. But they provide a very safe space for birds with fewer human disruptions. So it's a constant battle. We protect the birds, and the people say, I want to develop it, because some developer wants to make a few $1 billion. So we need to protect these and restore these islands. It's a component to fight, also getting to use it for fight. I love that complicated, but again, it helps us. When you got these islands, you've got other wetlands. You have what? What did we learn? What, the other types of courses you take and talks about, you talk about plant life and so on. Well, why do we need plant life? Why do we need green space? Why do we need trees? Why do we need grass? What does it do? Takes the carbon dioxide out of the air and kicks back oxygen. How many people here would be able to live without oxygen? Okay, so that's why realtors go in and nuke a site to develop. They take every tree, every piece of grass out of there. They go back and put a few little shrubs on this. Oh, it's a great place to live. Yeah. So we need to restore these islands and slow down. Like I said, they slow down the wind. They slow down currents. They also serve as carbon sinks. As I was saying, they absorb carbon dioxide out of the air. That grass, that beach grass, the brush, the trees. They're absorbing that. That's good for the environment. It's not bad, it's good. It's good to leave a forest up. It's bad to take it down and build a new subdivision. We should charge these developers millions of dollars for the fees for negating all the carbon capture that land would have otherwise. All right, most of it, get off of that. Modes of migration. We talk about diurnal, these are the soars, these are the hawks, they migrate during the day. And why do they migrate during the day? Because as Jim was saying about the vultures, these birds need the thermals so you have to get elevation. So during the spring and fall migration, when you see these large flocks of hawks, you'll see them sort of kettled. You see them as the air heats up. You'll see these hawks circling in these kettles. They get to a certain elevation. One of the hawks says, "Hey, we gotta get going. We gotta go that way." So they all start flying whatever direction they're going, either heading north or south, basically because of spring or fall. But then they start soaring. They're also flapping their wings, but in time they start to lose elevation because those usually vultures are fairly heavy bird. Hawks and eagles can be good size. And there's some weight to them compared to other birds, so they would need to have a lot of energy used to stay at the same elevation and just keep flying. So what they do is they flap, soar, flap, soar. But they're starting to drop as they're soaring. They're losing elevation. So they go down till they get the next thermal. They get that thermal back up. They go to a higher elevation. All right, time to start flapping and soaring again. So they go from kettle to kettle to kettle. That's why they follow the land mass. You don't have thermals over the Gulf. So they're during the day, they're doing that because they need the warm air for those purposes. Non-soarers fly shortly before dawn. There are some songbirds. There are some birds that will fly during the day. Smaller birds that are not these soarers or like I said, the eagle. Whereas the nocturnal, these guys fly at night. And again, if you think about some of the smaller birds, if you're exercising, like beating your wings, how many times per minute? For how many hours at a time, you're using up a lot of energy. We all sweat when we exercise. They sort of sweat when they're flying. So at night it's cooler. So their body temperature, they can keep their body temperature down a little bit by flying in cooler air. Typically, air is a little more stable at night. It's not as windy. It's easier for them to fly because they're not having as many disturbances, air disturbances. So again, they fly at night. What type of food sources do hawks, eagles, and those type of birds look for?
Mammals, small mammals.
Little small songbirds.
Oh,
So the songbird said, "Hell, I ain't gonna fly the same time as a flock of 500 hawks in one day. Are you crazy? I'm gonna stay down here in the trees all day long. They can just go look for somebody else to go chase. They're not chasing me." Sun comes up, hawks come down because there's no more hot air to float on. These little guys said, "Hey, time to go." Off they go. So they fly at night because don't have as much concern about predators at night as they do in the day. Air is cooler, so they don't have to, their ability to keep their body temperature at a little lower level is also there. So that's why some fly at night, why some fly during the day. Refueling stations, we talked about these. We need to worry about that. Again, just another depiction of these number of birds that are migrating. This was a couple years ago, but take a look at this in terms of numbers. Let's start over here on this, where the spring migration. Coming across the southern border of the United States, this number was about 3.5 billion birds came up out of Central and South America into across the southern border of the United States. Of the 3.5 billion, again, some of them will come and stay, some will just keep going, because as you can see here, there's about 2.6 billion birds that cross the northern border of the United States in the spring migration. So that doesn't mean just a billion of these birds stayed behind, because some of these birds only got as far as here and stopped. We have birds in Texas that were here during the winter, but they migrated to Canada for breeding in the summer. So it's not a direct correlation, but you can see that there's still a large number of birds that are heading across the northern border. And we flip back in the fall, we come back and say, well, these 2.6 billion, we now have 4, so they must have a decent breeding season. So we got 4 coming down into the United States from Canada and Alaska and wherever points north. We get down here, we got 4.7 that are heading across the southern border. Again, some of these 4 billion stop. A lot of the birds that were breeding here went further south. So you've got a change of a mixture of which birds are coming and going from the United States. But we got a 4.7 coming down here. Now look at these two numbers that during this non-breeding season, 4.7 went down, only 3.5 went north. So 1.2 theoretically 1.2 billion did come back, that went down. Well, you've got old age, you've got they were eaten by somebody, died of disease, you name it. So there's a loss of some of the population. But this will give you a little bit of a sense of that cycle of birds coming and the amount of birds that are going through here. So we can see that the reason why they're heading out of this congested area to breed is they can get up here and they can go from 2.6 to 4.8. That's almost a double in the number of birds that went into Canada in the Arctic areas, and then that came back to the United States after the breeding season was over. So there's a lot of territory up there that's open, a lot of the ability to be able to breed, a lot of food sources. We talked about the sort of the non-stop sunlight. There's a lot of plant life, there's a lot of insect life, there's a lot of food. They can raise young in a very, very short period of time. We talked about this number of billions. We went over the numbers. So we talked about that concentration again. These birds that are coming either from in the fall migration or in the spring, that bottleneck, you're taking 2,500 miles from coast to coast in the United States. You're taking all those birds and you're funneling them down to a 60-mile wide Isthmus of Panama. Again, the concentration of birds that are as they head south are you're just being forced like a pure funnel. It gets pretty tight when it gets to that point in the course of the migration. Some of our fall migration birds, for example, wood duck, pipe-billed grebes. Some of these, we have wood ducks here that come into this area during the winter. We also have wood ducks that breed here all year round. They're here and they breed. I've seen numerous pairs of wood ducks down in Creekside, the Mitchell Nature Preserve in Creekside. Those water ponds down there, there's wood ducks now with little ones in there right now. The Lakeside Park behind Buckle Elementary usually has a couple pair of wood ducks in there every summer. So I know they're around, so we have them, but you'll see more wood ducks in the winter. There's a lot of them that are in these areas, but there are some that stay and actually breed. The same with the pipe-billed grebes. We saw that one. I can do that one again. Just another shot. The greater white-fronted goose over in Aransas is a great place to see these birds during the winter. They migrate. They go up to Labrador and almost to the Arctic Circle in Canada to breed, and then come back down again. How do they navigate? We're not, again, the science is, I don't say it's all over the board, but there's several different sort of schools of thought, different things that people have looked at and try to determine how do they know where they're going. The sun, stars, and the Earth's magnetic fields. We know the magnetic fields basically run north to south, and they have the ability within their their skeleton and so on, that they can pick up these magnetic fields. And are able to then know that they follow that magnetic field, they can go from north to south just by zoning in on that. They have ability to sense stars in the sun, they know this. Obviously, that when the sun comes up the east and sets to the west, depending on if it's spring or fall, they know which, they should be off the port side or starboard side, which way is it going, which way am I going, okay, I have the sun over here, or else I have the sun over here, depending on the time of year. Environmental clues such as coastlines, mountain ranges, river systems. What's the one flyway called the Mississippi Flyway? For what reason? It follows the Mississippi River. Nothing else. We just follow that big stream of wide band of water all the way from Minnesota, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. That's a geological item that allows the birds to be able to just follow the river. I get from north to south is easy as that, or I can follow along the Atlantic coast. If I go too far, if I'm flying south along the Atlantic coast, I go too far left, I'm gonna be out over the ocean. I don't want to do that. So if I stay right along the coast, they're able to again migrate south along the coast, knowing that that's gonna get them where they want to go. Same with mountain ranges, different, things like features like that will help the birds navigate. So there's many different things that scientists believe are all somewhere in that genetic disposition of the birds and or what they learn from their mother and dads if they fly in flocks to be able to get from point A to point B. A couple winter birds that we have come fall migratory, you see coming in through here is the pine warblers. We have pine warblers year round. We have a lot more in the winter. American goldfinches, these are great visitors during the winter time, and then they're out of here by late spring. What are some of the concerns that we have that birds run into? They have that concern with the habitat loss, as we hit that a couple of different times, loss of wetlands, marshes. We have a constant battle trying to protect those. Wind and solar infrastructure. Everyone's saying, well, we got to have this good clean energy. We could spend 6 hours talking about how clean the clean energy really is. And we know it's not. So we can I won't go that way too much. The threat posed by turbines grow with each time a new one's put up at a high risk of birds. It's been shown that I'll do another picture there. So why are these wetlands being lost? We talked about the human activity. It's the building and construction. It's the Great Plains. One of the biggest losses for the birds of the Great Plains. Reason why the bird populations are down by 80 or 90% in the plains. It's not because of climate change or anything else. It's because you and I, the human beings, have taken the whole Great Plains and made it into a monoculture. We put it all into agriculture. There's no more grass, there's no more trees, there's no more insects, there's no more flowers. We've just mowed it open. So that development and our use of agriculture, the use of pesticides. Every time that mosquito Joe comes to the neighborhood, I'd like to shoot the guy because they keep trying to sell me, we'll get rid of all your mosquitoes. He says, can you guarantee you're gonna kill the mosquito and nothing else? No. Why do you ask? I says, because all these insects, the birds and everything around here need insects to eat and feed them till they're young. Nothing can live if you kill the insect. I says, go find some other idiot who bought your kid because it's just our use of chemicals. We got to be very concerned about how we're doing that. Water runoff, heavy metals, and so on. There's concerns there. Half the U.S. population lives in coastal counties. So you think about so it's sort of like within like a 50 to 75 mile from the coast inland. Half of our population in the United States lives along the coast. So talk about water pollution and so on and so forth. Wetlands, especially along the marine wetlands, are naturally altered by high energy events such as the erosion, the sea level rising for storms. They can be impacted, but a lot of times after a storm, the sea level comes up as soon as the storm goes by, everything goes back down again. It doesn't go up 10 feet and permanently stay up 10 feet. You have a high tide, the hurricane comes in, washes in, but then it goes back out again. Now, we wouldn't have the high tides further inland in Louisiana, for example, if we hadn't destroyed all the Mississippi Delta. But we killed the Delta that high and those coastal islands along there, which would have stopped those high waters through hurricanes. It now just roars through because nothing's slowing it down. And then they complain bitch about the problem anyhow. So we have to worry about the mitigation wetlands, draining wetlands to put in real estate, farms. Another thing is light pollution. Window strikes. Researchers estimate 1 billion birds are killed in high-speed crashes into buildings, windows each year. Not only birds fail to recognize glass, but they can also be confused by reflections for decorative trees inside building lobbies. You look at some of these big high-rise buildings where you've got a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 story atrium on the ground level, and inside they have waterfalls and palm trees, all this stuff. You got glass, and the birds go, trees in the water. Never make it. Navigational interference, satellite data revealing Chicago generates the greatest amount of light pollution, which attracts and disorients birds. Speaking of one of the most dangerous cities, unfortunately, Texas is in there. Chicago's #1, Houston #2, Dallas #3, LA, St. Louis. Round out sort of the top 5 in terms of light pollution. That's why we have this lights out campaign has been going on now for for a number of years, and it's continuing to grow. People are starting to realize you don't need to light up the freaking building if there's nobody there at night. You know, put a light up the tops of the planes, don't run into it, but other than that, you don't need to have that whole thing lit up like a Christmas tree. This is just a showing of 2020 in Philadelphia. A small collection of birds have bounced off the buildings. Included the black-throated blue warblers, catbirds, wood thrush, ovenbirds, just as a spattering of what happens. There was a study done in Chicago talking about lights on and lights off. If all the sort of note right now that dot line across centers, if everything's just the way it is, that's how many birds. That's sort of the line of number of birds that get killed. If all the lights are on, you can see that gold line rising up to, it increases the number of birds. If the buildings were pretty much all lit up, you'd increase 76% the number of casualties and so on and so forth. Conversely, if you turn down and drop down at least only half the buildings lit or less, you can have over a 50% drop in casualties just by turning the bloody lights off, because they don't get disoriented from that and hitting buildings. We have 5 times in Texas, 5 times more migrant birds detected than others on those. And these are the radar stations those earlier pictures from the birdcast. You have Corpus and Brownsville. We have a high migration of Gulf, Lonnie Gulf. Over on the other side, you have Jacksonville and so on. Northeast Florida could be a major landing point coming north out of the Caribbean, South America, depending on the wind. If you have a strong west wind, instead of coming up over Texas, where they end up, they head east, and where we got just east of us, the Florida Panhandle. So depending on, again, on the weather, that could change the number of birds that we have coming through here. And also, sometimes in spring migration we'll have more birds in the winter, because sometimes in the winter we have birds are following that wind, north or west wind. They got a tailwind, that may push them a little bit further east as they're heading south. They end up going further east, and they'll get picked up and then across Cuba and down into South America too. So again, that weather is a big factor. We talked about the lights out. And we're not going to spend too much time there. The wind energy, I said a minute ago, that the increase of wind turbines and solar panels. This is a picture of showing birds trying to navigate around windmills. New research has found, talking about the whooping cranes, because we know there's not that many of them, and they're in this straight line from Canada to Aransas, that these birds will avoid wind turbines, which is causing them the loss of important stopover habitat during their migration. Basically, within about a 5-mile radius of the windmill, the birds will not go. And where do you put windmills? In an open area where the winds blow. Where's that open area? That's the same place where the birds fly. So for every windmill, take a 5-mile radius, that habitat that was previously used by the whooping crane as a stopover or so on, can no longer use it. So we've shrunk their territory, their habitat, by putting up a wind turbine. So every turbine is taking away how much space. Every time the wind goes up, you're decreasing habitat for the birds. It's not just them, but every turbine goes up, how many more birds are getting hit by those things? Jim was talking about the elevations of 200, 300, 400 feet or something. These windmills, the blades are up a couple hundred feet long, so they're up top of the windmill. When the blade hits the peak of the arc, it's up 400 or 500 feet, 600 feet almost. So how many birds are in that ground level to 600 feet that they get chopped up by not seeing the bloody windmill? They can't sense it at night. Now, it's not just birds, it's bats. Even insects. I mean, there's a lot of impact that turbines have on various species. The big picture, is truly, what matters most is the kind of cumulative impact of the development we've done and what's going on. What source of mortality kills more or less birds? I mean, windmills are killing it, and that keeps growing and growing. We have the wildcat, we have the feral cat problem. There's another issue with, I was just reading an article the other day about these solar panels. And you put in these thousands of solar panels. And what they're finding too, is they're starting to track this, that from a higher elevation, depending on the angle that you're seeing that solar panel farm a couple of miles away from you, if you're up at how many hundreds of feet or more, it looks like it's just a nice shiny, blue shiny area. Well, what do waterfowl look like when you look for when they're flying? They want to land in a lake, they want water. What do they usually see? A nice shiny flat thing that looks like blue gray oil. Well, that's what those solar panels do to the birds. So they're finding out now that a lot of waterfowl dead birds are hitting solar panels because they think they're landing on water. They're not landing on water, they're landing on a bloody solar panel. Okay, so it's time, we really got to realize it's a critical time for conservation. We've got to figure out how we can live in this world, live with the birds, do what's right for everybody. How do we, deal with this habitat loss, collisions, buildings, and so on. The threat of migrants are many. The question has become, can new tracking technologies help unveil the mysteries of nocturnal migration while we still have the time to preserve one of our most natural, greatest wonders of the world. This is a global issue. Migrating climate change can indeed benefit birds. However, knowing bird land use change has a greater impact on habitat is really a crucial insight. How do we deal with how we use land? Working on habitat loss and habitat change is really going to be more effective than solely trying to consider climate change. Here's a flight of geese going over Boulder, Colorado. A beautiful evening, moon in the background. Birds are migrating every day of the year. There's a bird somewhere in the world, and so we really need to. You can't overstate the importance of protecting birds year round, and not just in their breeding and their habitat. We need to worry about all these feeding spots and stuff. Back to our golden plover. Remember that beautiful bird in the winter? He's heading south. He had that nice black and white. This is what he looks like when he gets back to central southern South America at the end of his fall migration.
Good stuff.
We'll take 5.
Wait, before we do that, Ruth? So we do have, one of our partners is Lake Creek Preserve, and Ruth has driven up from. Ruth is our coordinator for Lake Creek Preserve, and she would like to talk to me for a moment about.
Thank you. And I'm going to do the really short version because I know you guys want to take a break, but thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about what's really a great volunteer service opportunity. We've been doing it for about the past 6 months, doing guided hikes through Lake Creek Preserve. And can you just, since I'm not from this area, where is Lake Creek Preserve?
Okay, Lake Creek Preserve, if you go 1488, heading toward Magnolia, and you take 2978 up toward Wood Forest. Lake Creek Preserve is right before you get to Wood Forest on the right. They've actually, Spring Creek Greenway, Bayou Conservancy has bought property all along that riparian area. It floods like crazy, which is what it's meant to do. It's meant to hold water that comes out of those neighborhoods so that those neighborhoods don't flood. And so they've created this nature area where you can walk along this riparian area, and the trees, the vegetation is amazing. The snakes, the birds, the insects, just a beautiful place to go.
Yeah, it
You
is.
don't want to
Thank
go
you.
during the summertime because the bats and the chiggers and the insects keeps kind of carrying people away. Trust me, I helped build some of the initial trails and bridges in there. Yeah, that was hell at times. The poor Boy Scouts were going nuts trying to do their projects. But as Carol said, it is a neat place. There's a lot of different types of habitat in there. If you really get in there and start looking at it, understanding the changes of the soil types and the tree types between the beginning of Fish Creek or Lake Creek Preserve, and from there down to the creek itself is only quarter mile, but you would be amazed at the number of different quote, habitats that you can actually visibly see changing from the road at the north end of the property to the creek at the south end. It really is a very unique place. Just go during the winter when it takes some time to enjoy yourself, and realize, really look at, see what's in there, and what's, the Oxbow Lakes and everything that are in there. It is very.
And thank you. And if you actually point to two things that I wanted to bring up, which is, first of all, our last one until September, we're taking July and August off. For exactly that reason, but we were convinced to do one in June. So that's going to be 2 Saturdays from now. And we're going to do it at 8 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. in hopes of avoiding some of the terrible heat. And the other thing is, talking about we want the public also to learn about what you're talking about, the habitats, and really the main focus is the importance and the value of wetlands. So that's really, and so we've been doing these guided hikes. They're very popular. As soon as we advertise, I make Eventbrite sign up so that we know how many people are coming. And as soon as we put the notice out that there's registration is open, it fills up right away. So 6 months, we've been doing the monthly. It's obviously really popular. We haven't lost anyone in the woods. We had only one slip and fall in some mud. Unfortunately, he didn't land on his dog. So he was fine. So I'm going to say it's a win all around. We did. So we are looking for more volunteers. So if you're interested, basically there's a couple of jobs involved in helping to lead these hikes. One, of course, is to be the lead guide. And so there's a lot of interpretive signage there. So, you'll do well to learn all about the different habitats and all of that. But just in case you forget something, you can always look at the sign and say, and as this sign here says, at any rate, not that I've ever done that, of course, but and then also, because obviously you'd need to be kind of familiar with the trails and the habitat and all of that. But while you're working your way up to that, you can also just serve as a sweeper, the person who makes sure that we don't lose anyone and no one gets hurt. We almost did on one hike. I was the sweeper. And there's an area where there's a pond that is it's like a sandy banks that kind of go straight down. So there's fencing and a sign that says, do not go down here, it's dangerous. And so a family of 5 decided to, I'm like, where did they go? And they're climbing down. They found a place where there was no fencing. So the sweeper is very important, making sure that our people stay safe, our guests. So those are the 2 jobs. And so it's a great opportunity to do a little hiking. The trails, I think it's about 1.5 miles total. So it's not a long hike and it's level. They have boardwalks in areas that get, really wet and muddy. So we would love to have more people join us. I did bring a sign up sheet. And I guess, can I pass it around in either? I know you're about to take a break, right? So I can leave it here. If you can scan it and
just snap a picture and.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll leave this here. If you have any questions, do you have a pen?
But you want to put it up here on the board?
Yes, my contact info. Thank you. So you can just 713-397-9994. And again, my name is Ruth. So, and I'm a member of the Heartwood chapter, even though I live in Clear Lake. I love the forest. So that's why I'm all the way up here. But yeah, so does anyone have any questions? If you have any, just give me a call.
So one of the nice things about becoming a sweeper, as Ruth said, is that as a sweeper, you can hear what the lead is talking about.
Right.
So if you're not sure if you are ready to start leading hikes, it's something, most people are like, I can jump in there, if you are like that, being sweeper is
Yeah.
perfect, because you get to know the trails. You get to hear what the topics are that the leader brings up. We have somebody who does it very, very often besides Ruth, and they wear a headset.
Sometimes, yeah, he,
Depending on how many.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, Chris Smith, another Heartwood member, and I have to say, the first time that we went out there, I said, it was the Pride hike, and unfortunately, no one showed up for whatever reason. So I said, Chris, just practice, and he's like, I can't do this, and he is now like a crackerjack. He knows, like, he can answer all the questions, he's personable, so he's a great guy. Yes, you have a
Yeah, I'm
question?
gonna meet Chris on Wednesday morning. Because of our class, I haven't been able to do the hike, but it's gonna like just show me. around.
Awesome.
So if you guys wanna show up, for an hour.
I think you could put something on Slack
Yeah.
about the opportunity. So Wednesday morning at what time?
Eight before it gets hot. So I can get back to work.
Perfect.
That's
perfect.
awesome.
So if any of you have a chance to go out to Lake Creek Preserve on Wednesday at 8 a.m., it's gonna be, if Chris is leading the hike, it's gonna be awesome. So, please do think about signing up, even if you just sign up as a sweeper. Because that's a very important part, as Ruth said, we don't want to lose anybody.
Yeah. Yes.
What time do the hikes usually take place?
10 a.m. The June one is gonna be at 8 a.m. Yeah, exactly. So when we start back up again in September, we'll go back to the 10 a.m. and it's like about an hour. I know Chris has sometimes done it for up to an hour and a half, but it also depends if you have, people bring small kids who can't necessarily, do an hour and a half.
And how big typically are the groups and?
They have ranged from like 8 people to 15. So, and an average is, call it 10-ish, but sometimes it's like 5. So, and it's usually families.
What day of the week is it on?
Saturday. Yeah, and we'd love to do it more frequently than monthly. So that's one of the reasons, that also because just me and Chris doing it is, we need more people, but also if we can start doing them more frequently, that would be great too.
Now, one of the exciting things about Lake Creek Preserve is that there's enough land set aside that they're talking about putting in a nature center. Now, imagine having a nature center where we could meet right off of 1488, that's big enough to seat all of us. So we're excited about this opportunity because it will give us more space to do things that we want to get done. Yes,
Is it a county property? Who owns the property?
I believe the owners are the 501c3, right? Lake Creek Greenway.
Lake Creek Greenway Preserve or something.
Something
but I
like
think
that.
They don't own the property. Lake Creek Greenway Preserve Group was put together to help protect the land, and everything was, I think it was owned by the county because it was set aside as remediation for when they put the bridge through. The Bioland Conservancy has the conservation easement on the property that is owned by the county of Montgomery. It's not owned by us, by anybody else. The Greenway Preserve is a 501c3 organization that I helped set up about 5 years ago, that we could take in contributions and fight for protecting that land and expanding that piece of property and what we could do with it. But it's owned by the county under an easement of the Bioland Conservancy.
How many acres is it?
Pardon?
How many acres?
I believe that one's about 50 or 60 acres, 70 acres, something like that. It's on the north side of Lake Creek, as you cross the bridge coming from 1488 to the east, and just to the north is that new park that they put on the south side of Wood Forest.
Yeah.
So they're trying to tie the two together so that you can literally walk from one across the road. There's a gravel road that goes into some private properties to the east side. So they can try to tie that. A lot of historically, we're going to do some work with Wood Forest to try to get them involved. And that's a lot of people that come to the walks are actually residents of Wood Forest, because it's right. This is cool. The only negative I've got right now, but unfortunately, there's nothing they can do about it, is the ability to get into the preserve, because if you're coming south on Wood Forest Parkway from Wood Forest from the Conroe direction, You have to, even though it's on the left side, you have to cross Lake Creek, go up the hill, find a street, turn around, do a U, come back down, head north, cross the bridge, and turn right into the preserve. They could very easily put a road from the preserve 100 feet to the road on the south side of Wood Forest. And you can turn at the traffic light coming south, turn to traffic light, turn left, go 100 feet, and take a road 100 feet to the left. They have not, somehow they have not, the county, they've not been able to figure that, but I'd say it's a very simple, common sense way of getting into there without forcing people to go across the bridge, up over the hill, back down. And into the lake.
The good news is, though, they have finally put a large-ish sign, large enough so that as you're driving, you can see it. Because so many people just breeze past it,
Yeah,
so that's good.
that sign's great when you're heading south, you go through the traffic, like a big sign, Lake Creek Reserve to the
Right.
left. There's no left turn, you gotta
Right,
go across the bridge, you gotta
exactly.
go up the road, and you gotta turn out and back. So, but there is a sign of these preserve.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
That-
and a
That's
big one,
finally.
bigger. Yeah. If there's no other questions, thank you. I hope to see you guys on the trail soon.
Yeah.
So, and give me a call if you have questions. Thank you,
so
Carolyn.
much, Ruth.
I
So-
appreciate it. Thank you. And happy National Trails Day, by the way.
Listen to Janet. Awesome. Okay, so we have 15 minutes for a break. He is one of the people who is instrumental in getting this building built. She is a member of the Montgomery County National Gardeners. So far, I'm back in the county. She is also our local member of the Texas Bluebird Society. She brought one of the boxes with her. She will tell you how you can get a box. Okay, so your turn, Linda. The floor is yours. This microphone is, let me make sure.
Hello. Thank you.
There you go. Got it?
Yeah. But you told me I had to stand over here.
Let me make sure. Hang on. Pull you this way. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
All righty. We're going to talk about bluebirds this morning. And they didn't put this up here because they don't know what I'm going to say. Bluebirds are going to richly repay you for everything you do for them. This is a bluebird monitor set. I think it's out of print, so if you ever see it, buy it. It's a very good book for bluebirds. How many bluebird species are found in Texas? You already know you're going to have a test, did you? 3. All 3 species of bluebirds are found in Texas. You got your western bluebird, your eastern bluebird, and your mountain. So the eastern bluebird is the one we're going to have in this area. You can see that it's year-round in this area. The mountain bluebird is over in West Texas. And the western bluebird is also in West Texas. So we're not going to see those 2 in our area. If you do, call me. They're a member of the thrush family, includes bluebirds, robins, thrushes, and solitaires. This is the female. She's not as colorful as the male, but she's very pretty. You can see there's a white eye ring around her eye, which is common to bluebirds. This is the male. And this is the juvenile. They have speckled feathers, and when they molt in the fall, they will get their adult plumage. Looks like an angel, doesn't it? It's so pretty. A lot of my photos that I'm using here are Dave Kinnear's photos. He's a retired Marine. I once called him an ex-Marine. Oh, did I? No such thing as an ex-Marine. Anyway, he's a retired Marine, lives in Virginia, I believe, and takes the most wonderful bluebird pictures. So here we have male and female. The basic needs, food, water, shelter, and they also have to have a cavity for nesting. They don't nest in the bushes like the mockingbirds. They have to have a cavity, and they can't build their own cavity. So they rely on the woodpeckers to abandon their cavity, or they rely on you to provide one. What do bluebirds eat? Insects, right. They eat insects, grasshoppers, beetles, spiders, caterpillars, mealworms. I feed my bluebirds mealworms sometimes, but once they've gotten used to coming to your garden nesting, you don't have to feed them anymore, although it's nice to be able to watch them, so I do feed them occasionally. Only consider mealworms a snack, though. They're not a complete food for bluebirds, so don't give them too many. Here's one with the grasshopper. This is what they feed their young. This is what they eat themselves. And Mama's gone, and Daddy's trying to get this big old bug inside the nest box there. I don't know how one little bluebird's going to eat that whole thing, but it does. And of course, after they eat, parents wait, and little baby comes around and poops out a fecal sac, and the parent takes it out of the nest. They keep the nest very clean. When insects aren't available, the birds will eat berries. They will eat suet. They love the hot pepper suet. I use the hot pepper suet because the squirrels don't like it. And I'm not into feeding squirrels. Intentionally, anyway. They will eat pokeweed berries. They will eat American muteberries, Parsnip hawthorn. So these are all native plants you need to plant in your yard so that the bluebirds have something to eat when insects aren't prevalent. Strawberry bush, arrowwood viburnum, and I have all these plants in my yard. So maybe that's why I have bluebirds. Flowering dogwood also produces fruit. Rough leaf dogwood, and its fruit looks toxic to me, but anyway, birds like it. Coral honeysuckle, it's our native. You also need to plant plants that attract insects, because that's their main diet. So here's some native plants that will provide insects for your bluebirds. I gotta get that slide. Okay. No, all right, let's see. Go with this. You need water, and it needs to be a shallow water bath. Here, bluebirds taking a bath right here. Here are the three amigos, I call them. One of them is just enthralled with its own appearance here in the water. Habitat, are they country birds or are they city birds? Well, actually, they're both. Their preferred habitat is relatively open areas, low vegetation, grass, trees nearby. This is perfect. And here she is, monitoring on horseback. This right here is a baffle to keep snakes from crawling up into the nest box. On top of this, down inside, is a hardware cloth to stop the snakes from. I mean, you don't want to mount this too close to the ground because the snakes will just come over it. So you want to mount it right under the nest box. This thing right here is barbed wire on this cross right here, and that's to keep the cows from rubbing up against the nest box. So you gotta look at what's in your habitat and plan for it. They're good neighbors with other cavity nesters. Here we have, bluebirds in this box and tree swallows in this. Tree swallows don't nest in Texas very often, but, they have been known to. This is perfect habitat. You've got a, pecan orchard, open space. Bluebirds love it. Oh, this is also a good habitat in the neighborhood. And your very own yard is good habitat. You want an open area because they will not nest in a heavily wooded area. My front yard is wooded. I live in the woodlands. So it's heavily wooded in the front, but in the back, it's very open. So that's where the bluebirds are. You need a Texas turf nest box. And there's the nest box that Texas Bluebird Society provides. It is, we used to make them of cedar, and cedar got so expensive, we had to go to another wood, which escapes me right now. What is that wood? Cypress. It's cypress. It's very heavy. Cedar is a lighter weight, but that's cypress. And here you've got heat shields on this nest box. And they painted these black dots right here on all sides because you can see we have a heavy overhang there on the front. So sometimes the birds can't see the hole, so you gotta give them a hint. There is a hole somewhere. Find it. Okay, now this is in my backyard, and I put this umbrella up because this bird box is located in the wrong location. It's getting afternoon sun, so I put up this umbrella, and my husband says, Linda, can you take that umbrella down? I'm sure the neighbors are talking about us. They're talking about us anyway. I'm just giving them something. Anyway, he didn't care for that too much, and I have moved my nest box from that location. You can put a data logger in here that will record the temperature of your nest box. You don't want it getting too hot. You can see here, if you've got a, what is it? I had this little guy from South Carolina call me one time, and he said, "Can you send me 2 nest boxes?" And I said, "Well, sir, we don't usually ship out of the state of Texas, and we don't at all anymore." And I said, "But we ship in increments of 4. He said, "I don't need 4, I need 2. Well, we went back and forth and decided, I'm not going to win this argument. So I will send you, if I can, tell you, I said, if I can send you 2 nest boxes for what it costs me to send 4, I'll send them to you. So I sent him 2 nest boxes. And after a while, I got this information back from him. And what he had done was he tested all of these nest boxes and how hot they got. So we have a Texas weathered nest box, which is right here. It's very dark. They do go dark. And you can see that it gets up to 108.9 degrees. You've got dead bluebirds at that temperature. They can't take that. Normal venting, which is the slot underneath the roof here on the side. It used to be 1/2 inch, but because of his study, he changed it. He made one 5/8 inch, and you can see that it is cooler. So we changed to 5/8 inch because it's South Carolina. So if you got heat shields on the box too, you're down another 3 degrees, and painted, you're down another degree or so. So paint your box. Use an outdoor latex paint, paint it white or off-white. I was talking to a lady the other day, and I said, "Is your box painted?" She said, "Oh, yes." And I said, "What color?" She said, "Orange." Okay. We had to talk about how orange probably wasn't good. thing here, but the ambient temperature is 92.3, so you can see it gets warmer in the nest box, and the cooler you can keep it, the better. So if you've got a place that gets afternoon shade, that's perfect. Here's just a graph comparing those previous results. You can see about 4:30 in the afternoon, it's pretty hot. And why is this slide here?
I don't see those things.
Okay, these are all painted, and you can see that they're all around 100 degrees with the ambient temperature of about 94. Okay, birds don't tolerate squirrels very well, and they will chase them off, so. Raccoons. Some people think that if they put this little box over the hole, that'll keep their birds safe. Well, a raccoon's leg is that long. It can go down to the bottom of the box, it's no problem. If you put your box together with nails, they can take it apart. These boxes are put together with screws. And of course, if you mount your baffle too low to the ground, the snake just goes up and over it. And I'm having at that point, you gotta put your baffle up so the snake can't get over. And here, if you open the box, the Texas rat snake has already eaten your birds and is taking a nap. And so you always wanna tap on the box before you open it. You want, and get used to that hollow sound. Even a nest in there is not gonna change the sound too much. But a snake will change the sound of the box, so be careful. If it sounds like it's full of something, maybe. You can set a trap for the snake. You can put the hoop with the netting here, and the snake crawls up the pole and he gets caught in the netting, and he can't back down because the scales are caught, but then you've got a problem of providing for the snake. So here we are with the snake here, and you either have to be brave or let him die and then take care of it. But that's very effective. Cats, you don't want to mount your box on a telephone pole or a tree, because raccoons, cats, and all can climb the pole or the tree. And this shot was actually staged. This is another Keith Kreider shot right here. What he did was he put some cat food, like the cat's looking for where's the food. Hawks, this is another predator of bluebirds. And black widow spiders. So be careful when you open your nest box, you never know what you're going to find. Wasps, they will build their nest on top of on the inside, on the roof. So to keep them from doing that, you take a bar of soap and you rub it all over the top roof there on the inside, and they can't adhere their nest to that. And the bluebirds are not going to come in contact with the roof, so they're not going to get all soaked. But the wasp will be deterred. Flying squirrels, they will take up residence in your nest box. I had this happen one time, and I just let them have the nest box until they were done with it. Possums, this was where I used to work for environmental services in Woodlands Township. And I went out there and I noticed the hole was greatly increased. And I opened the box and these two baby possums were hissing at me. So I closed the lid a little faster. So let's go from courtship to a family. Here are male and female bluebirds on top of this nest box, and they're wing waving to one another. Courtship gesture. I love you and I love you back. So, hey babe, here I am. And she's so happy she's dancing. So he goes out looking for places to nest and brings her along, and if they go inside the nest box, it's a good indication they'll choose that particular nest box. There's also natural cavities here that they will choose, but they can't make their own. Like I said, they've got to depend on the woodpeckers making one and then leaving it. Here is the cavity right here in this limb. It's kind of hard to see, but that's where they're nesting there. Oh, I forgot to tell y'all, this is the X-rated home. This is a male, a female. He's so excited and she's so bored. Then you guys are wanting me to move on. Okay, so they pick the nest box and they're gonna build a nest. Now, she's the nest builder. Look at that little wimpy piece of straw he's got here. He's trying really hard to help, and she's just waiting on him to get out of the way. Because she's gonna build the nest. The distribution of housework did seem to be a bit typical. She flew full speed for 3 hours and he watched. If you've got pine trees, they're going to choose pine needles for their nest material. That's their preferred material for building a nest. But if not, they'll use grasses, catkins, sticks, whatever. Most bluebirds lay blue eggs. There's about 5% or a little less actually that lay white eggs. And it's just genetics. There's no reason really. Here are some white eggs. Normal clutch size 3 to 5, can be as many as 7 or 8. And the bluebirds, I have never had a variance of 14 days is normal for incubation of eggs. She will lay 1 egg a day, usually in the morning, until she completes the clutch, and then she incubates. So from the day she lays her last egg to the day they hatch, it's going to be 14 days. I've only had it vary 1 time, and all the boxes I've monitored, that was, they hatched in 13 days. And they're fed about 5 times an hour. You can see their little mouths open here. They're easy to count when they're this age. When they get this age, not so much. It's hard to tell one from the other. So count them when they're young, because you say, well, I had 5 eggs in there. Well, that doesn't mean 5 birds hatched. Could be only 4 that hatched. So you need to count them after they hatch. Here their wings are well developed in about 12 days. They're about almost ready to leave. When they start poking their little heads out of the nest box like this, you know they're going to fledge within a day or 2. Here the parents trying to feed them, and he's coming after it himself. Okay, here the parents are giving him encouragement, calling for him, come out of there. We're tired of feeding you, come on out. But even though after they fledge, they don't return to the nest, so you can take the nest out of the box, because she prefers to build a new nest for subsequent nestings. And they'll nest 3 to 4 times a year, you know. Clean it out. I have never seen them fledge like this. This is another Dave Kinnear photo. Here they are, like little soldiers. Well, Dave is an a former Marine, retired Marine, so he naturally has them coming out like this. Usually they come out 1 at a time. They continue to feed the fledglings in the treetops. Here's Daddy, watch out for the cats. And they're dependent on the parents for about 3 to 4 weeks, and finally the parents chase them off. Here are 2 little fledglings. You can see their little speckled feathers. Oh, it looks terrible when they're molting. You wonder what disease does my bluebird have? Well, no, he's just losing his feathers there. This is a backyard habitat, average of 15 bluebirds a year over the last 6 years. So that's lots of bluebirds the guy has. Oh, what is this now?
I got it.
Okay, monitoring. Check your nest boxes regularly during nesting season. In the afternoon if possible, because like I said, she may be laying an egg in the morning, you'll scare her off and she'll drop her egg somewhere in your yard. So check it in the afternoon. And they're easy to count when they're like this. That's hard to count bluebirds when they're like that. And use a mirror. I've got this little telescoping mirror that I use, and I'll open the nest box on the side and stick the mirror in. You don't want to be sticking your fingers inside the box to see what's in there. So use a mirror. And monitor, when you monitor, keep records. You think you'll remember, you will not. When you get my age, you will certainly remember. So write it down. And your nest counts. Nest Watch is part of Cornell University, and they'd love for you to send them your results of your nesting birds. So here we have a properly installed nest box. It doesn't have to be too high. I like to mount mine about, I'm 5 feet tall, so right about 5 feet for the bottom of the nest box is how high I like to do it, because you don't want to be getting up on a ladder to monitor your nest box. You'll fall, trust me. So let's go with predators and competitors here. This is probably the worst thing that anybody ever did, was introduce this bird to these United States. It's not a native bird. This is our house sparrow. This is the male, female, and they will go in the box and peck all the eggs of your bluebird. They will kill the mother bluebird if she's sitting on the nest. They, I never thought I'd be able to kill a bird. Here's what the house sparrow nest looks like. It's a mess. Here are their eggs. This is the bluebird egg right here, but their eggs are about the same size. Even the 3 amigos know the enemy when they see it. Trying to chase him off. And this is why I am able to kill house sparrows now. These are dead little bluebirds that were pecked to death by a house sparrow. Here's Papa. Don't put your mealworms on top of the nest box. Put them somewhere else in the yard. Here he is eating mealworms. He goes into the nest box, followed in by a house sparrow, and he pecked him to death. Pecked his head off. Here's a female bluebird. She's been pecked to death, and the sparrow has laid eggs on her dead body. That's cold. Here are 2 little bluebirds that have been pecked to death by house sparrows. Y'all ready to kill some sparrows now? There are passive controls to house sparrows. This is called a sparrow spooper. Now, these are mylar strips. You can order this. Just Google sparrow spooper. You can order one. Or you can make your own. You want to mount this on your bluebird box the day the female lays her first egg. So you got a nest in there and she's about to lay eggs, and when she lays that first egg, put the sparrow scooper up. They won't particularly like it, but she's got an investment in that box now. So she's not going to abandon it. But the sparrows, sorry. The sparrows don't like the mylar strips, and they won't go in the box. You can active control this to put a trap in. So here's a sparrow trap. You put it, there's the directions that come with it on how to mount it to your front of your nest box. Here it is tripped. I mean, not tripped, but it's set. And then here it is tripped. The sparrow goes in there, lands on that little triangle thing, and he's caught. He's not hurt. So if you accidentally trap a bluebird, you just let it go. But if you trap a house sparrow, don't let it go. What you do, here's a deluxe repeating sparrow trap. You got your sparrow, you trap one, you put it in this little decoy cage, and then you put some food here on this little bar, and the sparrow hops on that, and it's the elevator that takes them down into the trap. So you can trap them by the dozen. They'll call each other. Come on, we've got to put food and water in there, make them happy before they die. Now, you can. What is that?
Somebody is muted, Bobby.
Anyway, this is like cutting your fingernails. It doesn't hurt the bird. You can cut the first 5 feathers right here and do it to both wings so they're not lopsided and they can't fly. So,
They become gifts to snakes.
well, that, but, good for swimmings. Anyway, they won't bother your bluebirds if you do this. But this is a waste of time, because those feathers grow back. You think he's going to come for another feather trim? Now, this little lady right here is the one that inspired me. Yes, you can kill house sparrows. I was talking with her, and she said, I said, well, what do you do? She said, oh, I just take them, smash them up against a tree. Well, that's a little hard for me, but anyway, that's not the way I kill sparrows. There's a roosting spot in the wintertime for your bats. You've got a bluebird box, so leave it up all year. So let's go with friends of the family. Brown-headed nuthatch. This little bird is a cavity nester. And so you may, you may want to put up more than one bluebird box in your yard, one for the bluebirds and one for the other. Like the Carolina chickadee, and their nest is made out of green moss, feathers on top, you know. Here are the little baby chickadees. That's my favorite bird, Carolina chickadee. Tufted titmouse. This is another cavity nester. Carolina wren. These are noisy little birds. Oh, geez, geez. I gotta find my place again. I'm sorry. Shouldn't let me have a new bird. Carolina wrens. Now these are Carolina wrens right here with this yellow mouth. What's this right here? Cowbird, exactly. These are Carolina wren eggs, and the cowbird has a shorter incubation period. So it hatches first and gets all the food. So, not a friend. Prothonotary warbler, they like to actually nest above water. They're cavity nesters. Ash-throated flycatchers. Tree swallows, right here. They have been known to nest in Texas, but usually nest further north. So 10 steps to success. You want to choose the correct nest spots. Texas Bluebird Society is the correct nest spot. You want to locate it in the appropriate habitat, open space, trees nearby, afternoon shade. Provide predator guards, like your stovepipe baffle. You can get that stovepipe at HEB. You can get the baffle kits from me. I think I have baffle kits. You want to eliminate pesticide use because what bluebirds eat? Pests, insects. So don't be killing your insects. You're killing some of the baby bluebirds' breakfast. And you want to wait. It was 3 years after I put up a nest box before I had bluebirds, so they may not come right away. You want to monitor, record the data, clean out the box after each nesting, because they will nest again 3 or 4 weeks later. Check the boxes at the beginning of the season to make sure you don't have spiders or whatever in there. And investigate these 2 websites, silas.org and texasbluebirdsociety.org. Do I have any questions? Yes.
So when the baby birds leave, the parents leave also? Then
No, they
when
don't.
you take their nest away, they have to rebuild.
They have to rebuild, but she'll rebuild on top of that old nest anyway. So you don't want to get it too much. She prefers to build a completely new nest.
So I have 2 birds in my backyard now.
Mhm.
I live just outside the limits and in a neighborhood with a utility easement behind me, and there's lots of trees, so maybe they're nesting in some of those old trees. But that woodpecker's out there too. I don't know where they're coming from.
Okay,
Nothing in my yard yet. I've only been there 6 months.
so do you have an open yard or is it
Yeah, it's a
wooded?
pretty big yard.
Okay, well, put up a box.
Okay. But they're there. I see them in my yard.
Okay,
So I think they're nesting behind, but still just putting up.
so yeah, just put up a box and they may nest in your yard. That way you can sort of keep an eye on them. So, I do have, if you want to join Texas Bluebird Society as a new member, you know, you're not a member, never have been a member. Then when you join for $20, you get a free nest box. So just, you can join online and then contact me and let me know you want to pick up a nest box. And I can check online. I get the confirmations of people that join online, so. And I have nest boxes at home. Do you have a question?
Oh, I was gonna say, my grandfather used to have purple martins in his yard. And he would put CDs around his gourds because those apparently scared away the sparrows. Because it's like the mylar strips, they don't like shiny things. So he would hang CDs all around to try to keep the sparrows away.
Well,
Yeah.
I can remember that.
What would you put?
CDs, like
CD.
music CDs. Yeah, they don't like reflective, shiny things. But he still trapped a lot, he killed a lot of them. So they were still around, but it seems to help.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
What is nesting?
Nesting season starts in February. It goes through, usually by July, they're done. Yes, sir.
Is there a preferred direction for the whole north, south, east, west,
East.
east?
If you face it east, I used to have a box in the backyard, 2 boxes. And one was, they were both facing north. Well, chickadees took one of the boxes and the bluebirds would investigate the other box, but they would never do anything. So I turned the whole east, they started nesting there next day. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, hi Linda, actually, I got a word box from you at the Creekside rock running. We had some event. Anyway, so long story short, I have the bluebirds nest in my backyard, right? And I know they're fledged, and I was about to go out to clean up the nest, but then I noticed that I see bluebirds going in and out. I still haven't opened to see what's going on. So what is that all about?
What was in there?
I mean, so the nest is still there, right? So they nested and then I saw the little birds fledge. But now, so I thought it's all done, so I was thinking I'll go clean it up. The nest is still there, but then I see the birds going in and out every day. So do you think another pair would nest in the same nest?
They'll build a nest on top of what's in there. Yeah, I would go ahead and clean it out,
You know,
unless they laid an egg already and then, no.
I'm actually very nervous to open it, so I hardly. No, I don't think.
You just have to knock first.
Not.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How do you kill the sparrow?
Well,
I'm curious, just, you know,
I have this mesh laundry basket, bag,
okay,
mesh laundry bag, and I put it over the nest box, and I close it, and then I release the bird into the laundry bag. So if it's a bluebird, I just let it go. If it's a Carolina wren, I let it go. But if it's a house sparrow, I take the laundry bag around the front of the yard where I have a stone walkway and bang its little head on the walkway. I once used to do it, and then one time they went, "Gee, that's right." So now I bang them about 3 times.
and you'll kill the cowbird chick as well, right? Did you see one of those?
No, I don't.
You go ahead and let those
Yeah.
survive.
I do, because you can't, there's certain areas of the country where you can go ahead and eliminate the cowbird, but that's.
The cowbird is unprotected.
Yeah, it is, it's a native bird, but there's one.
Or the Kirkland warbler up in Michigan, they have got a special permit to have.
Yeah, there's.
But if you live in a certain area of Texas where, what bird is it? It's an endangered bird.
The golden cheek warbler.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's threatened by the cowbird, and you can eliminate the cowbird.
I'm sure those people.
Yeah.
No, you don't need a permit.
Yeah, wildlife, my dad has a wildlife management plan. And he can on his property because it's a bird wildlife
Mhm.
habitat or bird habitat. So it's part of their
Yeah.
plan to kill the cow.
Right, it's always best to check. To see if you need a permit, but in certain areas you don't, I think, you used to. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Is there a certain time of year that you should put up the bluebird houses?
Now,
Yeah.
whatever time of year it is, it's now.
Okay.
And you leave it up all the time. Because even in the winter time or the fall, they're not nesting, but they're checking. They're checking for future, okay? So they're checking your yard out and they're checking the box and they'll be back when it's time to nest. But if you wait until nesting season has already started, they may have already found some other place, so just put a box up. Yes, ma'am.
Friends that have bluebirds all the time, post pictures all the time. My concern is, do they care if you're checking on them and opening the lid every day?
You don't do it every day. You just check it once in a while. I check when I see that they have built the nest is complete. Then the next afternoon, I'll check to see if she's laid her first egg. Because she's gonna lay that egg in the morning. She's not gonna wait till the afternoon. And then I'll check in another 2 or 3 days to see if she's laid additional eggs. And sometimes I sit out and watch, and when I see her leave, when she's incubating, and I see her leave the nest, then I may go out and check. But I try not to check it too much. And I just write the dates down so that I know when to check to see if the birds have hatched. Yes, ma'am.
Do you just pull the nest out to clean it, or do you have to do something else special with the box?
No, you just, after they finish and the birds have fledged, you just take the nest out and put it somewhere not near the nest box. So the snakes can't smell the birds on the pine straw, just throw it away or put it somewhere else in the yard. Any other, yes, ma'am.
How close can bird and bluebird nest be to each other? Like, how many can you have in the yard?
Well, the books will say 100 feet, but birds don't read the books. So it can be closer, but I do not have them so that they can see one another. So if you have an open front yard and an open backyard, one in front, one in the back, as long as they can't see one another from box to box, you're okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How close can they be to trees, so anything like that?
You want them far enough away so something you can't jump from the tree to. Any other questions?
Linda,
Yeah.
when Bobby and I were living in Louisiana, I got a bluebird box and put it in the yard. And I mean, immediately we had bluebirds. And when the sun would come up, it would create this reflection of the yard in the kitchen window. And that male bluebird, starting at 5 in the morning, would start fighting with his reflection in that window. So Bobby now says, I can't ever put up another bluebird. They're very territorial. So to keep the boxes so they can't see each other, so important.
Yeah, they are very territorial. Any other questions? Y'all have been wonderful, and I made it with that in our work, so.
Okay, so I have just a couple of announcements to make. Melissa wanted me to remind you that you need to make sure your hours are in, so that way when we have graduation. Absolutely. So when we have graduation, you can, and you're close to certified, she wants to make sure she has time to approve those hours before graduation. Okay. I like to give her at least 3 days. So if you can get all your hours in by the beginning of the week of the 24th, that'd be awesome. Okay. Does anyone have questions about the group project? No questions about the group project? Awesome. Does anyone have questions? Yes, Lisa.
So we'll have a table.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna go look at, they told me that there are tables outside, because what I want to do is set it up kind of underneath this porch outside.
So you think it'll be this size? You think it'll be wider?
I don't know, do you want to come with me and look? Yeah, but I'm gonna go look right now and see what size those tables are, so we'll know. So I'll know how many we have and all that kind of stuff. And so we'll know how to set things up. The way the day is gonna go is we're gonna start from like 8 to 10. We have 70 people signed up. Wow. Now, 30 of them are y'all. Okay. But we got 40 other people who come in. You know, we have people from the chapter, we have people from families who are coming to support their loved one as they graduate. So we're going to have a lot of people come through. At 10 o'clock, we are going to have a little breakfast catered. We're going to come sit in here and then have the ceremony where we hand out certificates and pins. Okay. If you have not already RSVP, please do, so I know to count you so we have enough food. Bobby said if you don't, he's gonna be there with a little list. And he's gonna tell you don't get any food. Which is what a good mentor is supposed to do. Okay, so if you have dietary restrictions I need to be aware of, please just drop me an email. We're trying our best to make sure everybody gets something to eat. And I think if I have any other thing. Yeah, just make sure you get all your hours in, make sure if it's AT, you're putting it under AT, single presentation. Those are the two things that Melissa texted me just now and said, okay. Yes,
How long do you think graduation and the whole?
graduation will probably take about an hour, hour and a half. It goes pretty quickly. You'll pick up your polo, you'll get your lanyard, and you'll get your name badge and your certificate. So it's pretty streamlined. Oh, class photo. Don't let me forget to do a class photo. I hate it when everybody leaves from like, it's like, you know, it's just the worst when you realize I've missed this opportunity. Yeah, John?
How much time will we have to set up the booth?
Oh, probably about half an hour or so, 15 minutes, half an hour. It doesn't take long. Yeah, usually, you know, you get your stuff ready to go and, you'll be so excited, the adrenaline will be rushing. It'll be like Superman setting up a booth.
So we set up the booth starting at 8 and then we start rotating around at 30 or how that work, or we need
Yeah.
really for that?
Because usually you'll have two people manning the booth at all times, okay? Because there are more than two in each group, except I think for Steve and Gary. Because there are more than two, you'll be able to let some people go rotate through, and then they need to be cognizant of coming over and relieving you, so that way you can make your round. If they don't come back, one of you gets to go find them and say, you need to move your turn, right? So make sure all that happens. So y'all need to be aware of your group, where your group is, what they're up to. We're gonna have, I think the president of the chapter, Sharon, is gonna have another booth for y'all to look at. That's gonna talk about the different committees and stuff, which is kind of cool that she took this opportunity to do that for us. So, so make sure y'all stop by that booth. And once everyone's had a chance to go through and look and ask questions, because you are gonna find things that you're like, I never knew this. We get one of